anniversary of FMW, where we will be going over the year 2019. Brett, can you start us off by going back and talking a little bit about what happened in 2018 for everybody?
So in 2018, the big news was that Atsushi Onita had came out of retirement once again after about a year. He would end up working the CZW promotion once again late in 2018, and really this time wanted to focus on working outside of Japan more, as he had agreed to work for the GCW Spring Break show in April that would be taking place in New York, and he was looking to wrestle in explosion matches in the US, Australia, Europe, and Mexico. Then you have Freedoms, which gave Masashi Takeda a run with the title for about half a year before losing it to Jun Kasai at the Christmas Deathmatch show. So Kasai is starting off 2019 as the champion once again, as this promotion is going to look to focus on their 10th year anniversary show coming up in October. And then Takeda, he had also lost the Big Japan Deathmatch title after about a little over a year with it in late 2018 to Masaya Takahashi, who Big Japan is giving another chance with the belt. Then Mr. Ganosuke, he had retired back in April, pretty much leaving Masato Tanaka as the last full-time wrestler from the new era of FMW in the late 90s, where the wrestling really mattered and was the focus of the promotion. And Tanaka, he's going to go into 2019 feuding with his old Voodoo Murders group, as they're going to have some explosion matches for the Super Fireworks sub-promotion.
Ryuji Ito would challenge for the Big Japan Deathmatch title against Takahashi on January 14th at Corrigan Hall. Can you go over this match for everyone?
Yeah, so this is Ryuji Ito's 20th anniversary show, so he's going to get a title shot here against Masaya Takahashi in a fluorescent light tubes Thumbtacks death match. And Ito, he would start off the match right away by dumping Thumbtacks in the ring, and they would both begin rolling around the ring on the Thumbtacks before exchanging light tube shots to the head. And then Ito would end up slamming Takahashi onto the Thumbtacks and just begin shoving Takahashi's head down on the Thumbtacks to allow him to cut open his forehead before putting Thumbtacks in Takahashi's mouth and just striking him with the Thumbtacks flying out. Ito would then place light tubes in Takahashi's shirt and kick the light tubes, breaking them, which would result in Takahashi taking his shirt off, as the crowd so far is kind of dead here watching them do the same stuff they always do. They would then grab several buckets of Thumbtacks and just dump them all over the ring, as the ring is just covered in tacks, which would get the crowd to begin finally cheering, as Ito and Takahashi would just begin swinging the buckets, with Ito managing to smash his bucket over Takahashi, and then Ito would go to the ropes, but Takahashi would try to drop kick him as he was coming back, but Ito would stop himself just short, causing Takahashi to fall right into the Thumbtacks. But then he would throw Takahashi into the ropes, and Takahashi would do the exact same thing, with Ito trying for a drop kick and missing and landing on the Thumbtack, as Takahashi would just roll Ito up all into the Thumbtacks and cover him, but Ito would manage to kick out. Takahashi would then lay Thumbtacks on Ito and then flip off the top and cover him, but Ito would still manage to kick out. And then Ito would come back and hit a Shining Wizard on Takahashi and then grab some light tubes from under the ring and place Thumbtacks on the light tubes, as he would lay them over Takahashi and hit Takahashi off the top with a Dragon Splash, breaking the light tube across him, with Takahashi still managing to kick out when Ito would cover him. Ito would then take a shovel and just begin digging up Thumbtacks onto Takahashi and go up to the top again, but Takahashi this time would get up and just throw a chair at Ito and then smash a light tube over Ito's head, followed by hitting a superplex off the top onto the Thumbtacks and then hit a German suplex on Ito, but Ito would still manage to kick out. Takahashi would then grab Ito and nail him with the arm drag, sending him into the Thumbtacks, and then Takahashi would go to the outside and grab a stack of light tubes from under the ring, bring them back in, and nail Ito with a jackhammer through the light tubes and cover him and get the win to defend the Big Japan Deathmatch title. This was okay. The first half was just them going through the motions, and the crowd reacted like it. They picked up a little at the end by bringing in more Thumbtacks than I have ever seen in a match, but even then, it still did not really pick up too much, and the crowd just kind of was mildly into it at that point. Ito is pretty broken down, but he could still have a really good match on a good day, but Takahashi is proving that he is just not the guy that can carry someone like Ito, even though this is Big Japan's second attempt at giving Takahashi the ball and letting him run with it.
Freedoms would hold a match on January 19th in Yokohama to determine the new tag team champions. Can you go over why the titles were vacated and what happened in this match?
So GCW is an American deathmatch promotion. Over the last couple years, they've created a budget to be able to bring in Japanese deathmatch wrestlers that they feel would help draw their shows. They had brought in Masashita Keita and Asami Kadaka a couple months earlier, and here they're going to bring in Daisuke Masaaka for a show on January 12th in Summit, Illinois, in a match against GCW wrestler Alex Colon. And in this match, they would end up doing a spot where Masaaka would end up hitting a sliced bread number 2 off the turnbuckle, sending Colon through a light tube table on the outside. But as Masaaka would end up coming down, he would end up breaking his kneecap after landing on the outside. A bloody Masaaka would end up getting back in the ring, and they would pretty much just go right to the finish, as Masaaka would end up smashing some light tubes over Colon and then nail him with a knee and pick up the win. Masaaka would know he was severely injured and need help to the back, as Masaaka would end up having to go back to Japan and need surgery on the broken kneecap, as the diagnosis would be that he'd be out of action for a little over a year. This would result in him and his partner Violento Jack having to vacate the King of Freedom tag team titles that they've had since May 2018 as the top heel group in the promotion. So Jack's going to have to find a new partner, and that's going to be Mammoth Sasaki, as they're going to take on Kamui and Toru Sugiura for the vacant tag titles here on this show. And Mammoth and Jack, they would rush the ring and just charge at Kamui and Sugiura. Sugiura, he would manage to knock Mammoth over the top rope and then deliver a dropkick to Jack, sending him out of the ring, as Kamui would end up hitting Asai moonsault onto both of them. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Sugiura would end up picking Jack up and hitting him with an over easy. But then Mammoth would come over and pick Sugiura up and hit him with the 29 years old, followed by Jack hitting Sugiura with a Shuban and cover him to get the win, as Mammoth is pretty much going to take Masaaka's spot here as the tag team champion with Jack. Afterwards, Jack would end up calling him and Mammoth as a team a super tag team, as that's pretty much what they're going to be here for a long time going forward.
Jun Kasai would defend the King of Freedom title on February 10th in Shinkiba against a Big Japan wrestler. Can you go over who his opponent was and everything that happened during the match?
Yeah, so Toshiyuki Sakuda is going to challenge for the King of Freedom World Championship. I've talked about him in other episodes. He's a Big Japan mid-card worker who's a good worker that's willing to kill himself, but he is a small individual. Kasai, though, is high on him, so because of Freedoms in Big Japan, having a working relationship that started back up again in 2017, it's been mostly Sakuda that has been used by Freedoms to work some random shows. Kasai, now being the champion, wants to have this match with Sakuda, although they weren't going to risk it being a Corgan Hall match. Instead, they're going to have it at Shinkiba, although it would end up selling out the small Shinkiba building, knowing that it was going to be a really good death match between these two. So it's going to be Sakuda challenging Kasai for the King of Freedom World Championship in a fluorescent light tubes death match, and this would start with both of them giving each other the middle finger to one another before they would begin smashing light tubes over one another's heads. Sakuda would then try to send Kasai into the ropes with light tubes attached to it, but Kasai would manage to reverse it and send Sakuda into the ropes instead, with Sakuda pretty much just taking out the entire row of light tubes, which would get a really good pop from the crowd and a Kasai chant. Kasai would then begin cutting open Sakuda with light tubes before taking a knife and using it in Sakuda's mouth. Kasai would then get Sakuda in the turnbuckle and get the fans to begin chanting BJW, and then do the double middle fingers to the crowd and scream "fuck BJW" before biting Sakuda's head. Sakuda would then start striking Kasai and just grab a chair and toss it at Kasai. Sakuda would then put Kasai in the corner with light tubes and dive off of a chair, breaking the light tubes, as Kasai would get out of the ring, and Sakuda would end up diving off the top rope onto him. Sakuda would then pull out a board with saws and light tubes on it and throw it back in the ring with Kasai. Sakuda would then try to suplex Kasai onto it, but Kasai would manage to get away and then hit a bulldog, sending Sakuda face first into the saws and light tubes. Kasai would then look to do a reverse tiger driver on a stack of light tubes, but Sakuda would manage to reverse it and hit a reverse tiger driver of his own on Kasai, but the light tubes would not break, so Sakuda would end up just smashing them across Kasai, and then Sakuda would end up pulling back out the board with saws on them and place it over Kasai and smash it over Kasai with a chair. Sakuda would then grab sticks, but Kasai would end up grabbing them from him and just shove them in Sakuda's mouth, which the crowd would get really loud seeing, as Kasai would then just begin pulling Sakuda around with the sticks in his mouth and then hit a reverse tiger driver and cover him, but Sakuda would manage to kick out to a loud pop. Kasai would then place a stack of light tubes on a set of chairs and bring Sakuda up to the top, but Sakuda would end up grabbing Kasai and hit him with a sliced bread number 2, sending Kasai through the light tubes on the stack of chairs and cover him, but Kasai would manage to kick out. Sakuda would then finally pull the stick out of his mouth and place one through Kasai's mouth, and then slam Kasai and place a stack of light tubes over him, as Sakuda would go up to the top and hit a 450 splash, but his leg leg would mostly end up being the one to break the light tube, as he would end up selling it being in pain, and Kasai would get up right away, pull the stick out of his mouth, and hit a brainbuster on Sakuda, and then a one-winged angel and cover him, but Sakuda would kick out. Kasai would then go up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash and cover him, but again Sakuda would kick out, so Kasai would then go for a reverse Tiger Driver, but Sakuda would end up landing on Kasai, and then hit his own finisher, the Sakauchi, but Kasai would kick out. Sakuda would then end up hitting a German suplex on a set of light tubes, but Kasai would kick out, and the crowd would begin going crazy at this point. They would begin headbutting one another when Kasai would pull out skewers out of his shorts and shove them in Sakuda's head, and then hit him with a reverse Tiger Driver and cover him, but again Sakuda would kick out as the crowd is loudly screaming for Kasai, and then Kasai would end up giving Sakuda the kiss of death, and then nail him with the stimulation pile driver and cover him to pick up the win and defend the King of Freedom World title. This match was fun. The transition kind of sucked, as several times it would be someone hits a devastating move and the person kicks out, and then moments later they're on offense doing their set of moves, but the crowd didn't care as they were so into this match. Obviously making Shinkiba light up isn't the same as Corgan, but for a Shinkiba show, which at this point Shinkiba usually doesn't matter as they are just there to set up for the next Corgan Hall show, this was great, and the sold out crowd loved being able to see a Corgan Hall-like match without it actually being at Corgan.
Jun Kasai would then make his GCW debut on February 16th in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Can you go over how this match was made and go over the match for everybody?
Yeah, so this will be Kasai's first match in America since 2014 when he competed for CZW. As I mentioned earlier, that GCW had a budget to try and bring in as many popular Japanese deathmatch workers as they could. So they brought in Takeda, Kodaka, Masaaka. Well, they had been repeatedly asking to try and bring in Kasai, but Kasai had always told them no. As Kasai, it just wasn't worth it to him to come back to America. He'd already done it a bunch in CZW years earlier, and now his wife has recently had another child, and he's been busy with his side clothing business. But GCW would eventually make it work, and they would pretty much book this show based around Kasai in the main event against Alex Colon in a fluorescent light tubes glass board death match. This would start with both of them taking light tubes and swinging them at one another before they would both end up smashing them over one another's head, with Colon grabbing Kasai and just throwing him into the ring ropes with light tubes, as Kasai would go through pretty much every single one of them. Kasai would then get up and put a gadget in his own forehead and then just begin headbutting Colon with it before putting it in Colon's head. Kasai would then begin working on Colon's head by biting it and then grab another stack of light tubes, but Colon would just hit a spinning back fist, breaking them over Kasai, and then go up to the top, but Kasai would end up sending him flying to the outside on a barbed wire board with light tubes on top of it in a really cool spot. Kasai would then pick up Colon on his shoulders and send him face first into the light tubes, followed by hitting him with a brainbuster and cover him, but Colon would kick out. Kasai would then place light tubes by Colon's head, but when Kasai would end up going to charge at him, Colon would get up and try to suplex Kasai with the light tubes behind him, but Kasai would manage to break the light tubes over Colon instead, and then just throw him into the corner into the glass board in another awesome spot. Kasai would then nail Colon with a reverse Tiger Driver and go up to the top and go for a Pearl Harbor splash, but Colon would get his knees up and then place the light tubes over Kasai and nail him with a running double knee into the light tubes, breaking them over Kasai and cover him for a 2 count. Colon would then super kick a light tube across Kasai's head and then take a huge stack of light tubes and hit a double foot stomp, breaking them over Kasai, but Kasai would no sell it right away and give Colon the double middle fingers, which would make the crowd go crazy as they both would begin exchanging strikes with one another before Kasai would end up pulling out skewers and stick them in Colon's head and nail him with a reverse Tiger Driver and cover him, but Colon would kick out. Kasai would then place the other glass board over Colon's body and go up to the top for a Pearl Harbor splash through the glass board, but Colon would no-sell it and get up right away, but then Kasai would give him the kiss of death and nail him with the stimulation pile driver on a stack of light tubes and cover him to pick up the win. So I really don't like American indie death matches that much just because I've watched so many death matches in Japan and I just don't think the American ones compare to them. They're just not as good. This was good though, and the crowd went crazy for it as they did some crazy spots here and the crowd loved every second of it. So they did what they needed to do. I don't think there was really that much great wrestling added into the death match element to this match, which makes someone like Kasai or Takeda being able to do that great at what they do. But Kasai knew this wasn't Corgan Hall, so just a whole bunch of crazy spots was good enough, and that's what they did, and it worked. Kasai, who can't speak English but can read it, would end up reading from a note inviting the GCW guys to come to Japan and face him, as the GCW guys are going to be coming to Japan in August for their own shows, but also they'll be working Freedom's and Big Japan shows as well.
Super Fireworks would hold an Escape the Cage Exploding Bat Death match also on February 16th in Kawasaki. Can you go over what happened in this match?
Yeah, so Escape the Cage rules is pretty much where everyone's trying to get out of the cage as soon as possible, and the team that has all their members get out of the cage first wins the match. This is going to be Masato Tanaka teaming up with Takeya Sugiura, Yuji Hino, and Asuka. They're going to take on the Voodoo Murders team, Ataru, Chris Weiss, Shogun Akamoto, and Yoshikazu Yokoyama. And this would see Hino, who hates wrestling in death matches if he's ever actually wrestled one, usually refuses to. He's wearing a motorcycle helmet here to the ring, as well as a jacket, as he wants nothing to do with any explosion or anything like that. Yokoyama, he would end up climbing over Hino and get out of the cage right away, with Hino following him, so I don't even know why he bothered to wear the helmet, as he got out of the ring pretty much right away. Taru would then end up turning on the exploding barbed wire bat and try to hit Tanaka with it, but Tanaka would end up getting his hands up and block it, but the bat would still end up going off anyway. Tanaka would then end up hitting Taru with the sliding D, and then set up a table and go up to the top of the cage and dive off the top, sending Taru through that table. It would come down to just Tanaka and Sugiura taking on Taru, as Tanaka and Sugiura would both try to get out of the cage at the same time, when Yokoyama from the outside would end up throwing powder in both their faces through the cage, as a countdown would take place all of a sudden, and one side of the cage would explode where Tanaka and Sugiura were, as I did not see that coming, and Taru would end up getting out of the cage for the Voodoo Murders win here.
Atsushi Onita would appear for the Giant Baba Memorial Show on February 19th at Sumo Hall. Can you go over the match and all the details surrounding what ended up happening afterwards with Onita?
So Onita would announce about a week before the show that he was going to need double knee replacement surgery after this event. Onita stated that it was due to his injured knee that had made him originally retire back in 1985, and it was getting worse and worse through time, and also because of all the pressure that he had been putting on his good knee because of having a bad knee and working 30 years and 1,000 matches. Now his good knee had gone bad, and the double knee replacement surgery was going to be needed for both of them because of all the wear and tear throughout the years on both knees. And on this show, it's going to be Atsushi Onita, Kendo Kashin, Hideki Suzuki, and Hideki Osaka taking on Great Kajika, Shuji Ishikawa, Mitsuya Nagai, and Hikaru Sato in a street fight. Onita, he's accompanied by someone wearing a Freddy Krueger mask, which these groups nowadays sure do love to use the Freddy Krueger gimmick as an FMW nostalgia thing, even though this gimmick was only used for a couple months in 1996 in FMW, and it was mostly a wing gimmick. The match would start with Onita and Kojika facing off for the first time since the 80s in All Japan, as Onita and Kojika would end up going into the crowd with Freddy Krueger randomly hanging out with them as well. They would end up getting back in the ring with Onita grabbing a chair and just smashing it over Kojika's head, and then set up a table and look to pile drive Kojika through it. But Kashin would keep insisting to Onita to do it to Sato instead, and good thing he did that, because this table would not break, but Sato's head would end up leaving a mark to it. Ishikawa would then end up pulling out a barbed wire board, and he and Kojika would end up throwing Onita into it, followed by Sato pulling out a guitar and just smash it over Onita's head. Ishikawa would then look to chokeslam Onita into the barbed wire board, but Onita would end up spitting red mist in his face before he would even get pulled up. Onita and Suzuki would then take Sato and suplex him through the barbed wire board, as Onita would then smash a chair over his head, and then Suzuki would end up grabbing Sato and hit him with the double arm suplex and cover him to get the win. This was not good, but it had potential to be a disaster, and it wasn't, so I would consider that a win, as it was fast-moving with everyone coming in and out, and Onita did well considering his knees were at an all-time worst here. Onita would also come away with a huge gash on his head and bleeding from the guitar shot, as Onita would randomly kiss Sato, which I'm guessing was him getting rid of the rest of the mist out of his mouth after screwing up the chokeslam spot with Ishikawa. Onita would then later, because of his first interaction with Kojika in years, agree to begin working for Big Japan later in the year after he had recovered from his double knee replacement surgery, and is going to team with Kojika when he is healthy.
Freedoms would hold their first Corrigan Hall show of the year on March 31st, with one wrestler getting a new push. Can you go over who that wrestler was, the top matches on the show, and how the show did for everybody?
So they would announce a crowd of 746 fans, which the previous two March Corrigan Hall shows had done 738, so 8 fans extra for this show compared to the last 2 years. So to me, that just means that this is the number they're just always going to get at a March Corrigan Hall show. It's the same fans coming to this type of show, the Christmas Deathmatch show or the Deathmatch Carnival. They do better. They're going to bring in more fans, but this show, this has a set base of fans, and that's what they're always going to draw for a show like this. And on this show, Masashi Takeda is going to take on Toru Sugiura. So with Freedom's planning to do their 10-year anniversary show in October, they've decided that it's time to really start the push of Toru Sugiura, who's been there for about 8 years, and he's always been Takashi Sasaki's apprentice. So Sasaki has decided that now is the time to begin Sugiura's push to become the ace of the promotion. So this push is going to start with taking on Masashi Takeda in a fluorescent light tubes death match. This is something similar to what they did with Daisuke Masaaka, where Takeda and Masaaka had this great death match that began Masaaka's push that would eventually see him defeat Takeda 2 years later as champion. And like I said, this is going to be a fluorescent light tubes death match, and it would start with Sugiura smashing a light tube over Takeda's head before the match would even start. Sugiura would then take some more light tubes and swing them at Takeda, who would duck it and just kick those light tubes, breaking them across Sugiura. Takeda would then smash the light tube over his own head to a loud Takeda chant before throwing Sugiura to the outside and smashing a light tube over his head and then throwing him in the crowd, followed by smashing a chair over Sugiura's head. Takeda would then take more light tubes and just run Sugiura's head into the turnbuckle with the light tubes breaking across Sugiura's head. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Takeda would begin cutting open Sugiura with a light tube and then shove a light tube into Sugiura's mouth with blood just coming out of Sugiura's mouth in an awesome visual. Takeda would then slam Sugiura on a ladder and then turn the ladder sideways and slam Sugiura on the side part of the ladder and then send Sugiura to the ropes, but Sugiura would end up jumping onto the top rope and dive onto Takeda. Sugiura would then place Takeda in the corner with light tubes and dive onto them, breaking them over Takeda, and then look to swing a light tube at Takeda, but Takeda would manage to duck it and move out of the way and then grab that light tube and break it using Sugiura's mouth with blood spitting out of his mouth. Takeda would then throw a stack of light tubes at Sugiura with him catching them, as Takeda would end up delivering a dropkick, breaking them across Sugiura, and then Takeda would end up taking a stack of light tubes and look to kick them, but Sugiura would end up moving out of the way and try to smash them over Takeda's head, but Takeda would block it, so Sugiura would end up just drop kicking them, breaking the light tubes across Takeda. Takeda would then go to the outside as Sugiura would take the ladder and place it on the ropes and climb the ladder and in an incredible spot flip off of it onto Takeda on the outside to a huge Sugiura chant. They would end up getting back in the ring as Sugiura would end up headbutting Takeda to a loud pop from the crowd, followed by Sugiura hitting his finisher, the over easy, on Takeda, with Takeda barely managing to kick out. Sugiura would then place light tubes over Takeda and climb up the ladder, but Takeda would get up with the light tubes, climb up the ladder as well, and just smash the light tubes over Sugiura's head, and then superplex him off the ladder, with Sugiura getting up and going for a rolling elbow, but Takeda would move out of the way and German suplex Sugiura, and then place light tubes over Sugiura and climb up the ladder and dive off of it, breaking the light tubes over Sugiura and cover him, but Sugiura would still manage to kick out. Takeda would then end up grabbing another stack of light tubes and pick up Sugiura and hit him with the reverse U-crash on the light tubes and cover him to get the win. Awesome match, as this was exactly what Sugiura needed to do to prove that he could compete at a high level of a death match and hang with someone like a Takeda here. So going forward, like I said, Sugiura, he's going to be the number one project here for Freedoms, as they're going to push him as fast and as hard as they can to see if they can get him ready to be a legitimate contender for the title. Then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai taking on Kinshi Fukimoto in a no-canvas glass board gadget death match for the King of Freedom World Championship. This is a rematch of the March 2016 Corrigan Hall main event, where Fukimoto challenged Kasai for the King of Freedom World title. And just like their 2016 match, this would start with both of them sitting down in chairs in the ring and just begin smashing light tubes over one another's heads until Fukimoto would get pissed off and just slam Kasai onto the light tubes, with Kasai coming right back and slamming Fukimoto. Kasai Kasai would then shove one of the gadgets in Fukimoto's head, but Fukimoto would just begin headbutting Kasai with it and then shove it in his head. Fukimoto would then just begin shoving the gadget in Kasai's arm and backdrop him onto the wooden boards laid across the ring, as Fukimoto would look to hit a German suplex on Kasai through the glass board, but Kasai would turn it around and suplex Fukimoto into the glass board, but oh shit, the glass board would not break, as Fukimoto's head would end up bouncing off of it. Fukimoto is now holding his head in pain as Kasai would go over, and you could see him talk to Fukimoto before just clotheslining Fukimoto into the glass board, as would finally break this time. And then Kasai would begin taking the boards out of the ring and place the other glass board in that hole of the ring and look to hit another reverse Tiger Driver through the glass board, but Fukimoto would manage to get away and just begin striking Kasai, and then take Kasai and hit him with the package pile driver, other glass board in the hole in the ring, to a big pop from the crowd. While both were under the ring, Fukimoto would end up taking a hook and begin pinning it to Kasai's mouth, as Fukimoto would come out of the hole back into the ring and to the vision of the fans with the fishing pole and begin pulling Kasai up under the ring with it in an awesome spot, followed by another package pile driver on the boards and cover him, but Kasai would manage to kick out. Fukimoto would then pull out a new weapon that is going to be used a lot this year in a potted plant vase and look to package pile driver Kasai onto them, but Kasai would manage to reverse it and send Fukimoto flying into them instead. Kasai would then take a chair and just begin smashing them and breaking them into sharp pieces, but Fukimoto would come over and just nail Kasai with a sit-out powerbomb onto them in another awesome spot and cover him, but Kasai would still manage to kick out with the fans now screaming and chanting for Kasai. Fukimoto would then look for a package pile driver off the turnbuckle, but Kasai would then headbutt him, causing him to fall on the potted plants, with Kasai then hitting a Rakurakai knee drop off the turnbuckle while chanting Masaaka's name and cover Fukimoto, but Fukimoto would manage to kick out. Kasai would then lay the gadget board on Fukimoto and go up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash, but again Fukimoto would kick out, so Kasai would end up picking Fukimoto up and hit him with a one-winged angel while saying Kenny Omega's name, followed by a reverse Tiger Driver and cover, but Fukimoto still would end up kicking out. Kasai would then take more of the broken potted plants and nail Fukimoto headfirst onto them with the reverse Tiger Driver, and that would finally get the win. Another awesome match, much better than the 2016 match they had, as this was more of a Kasai match than a Fukimoto let's hurt each other for no reason type match, and I love this match. Both this and the Sugiura and Takeda match were incredible matches. As usually Freedom shows, you only get one of these, and so this has always been one of my favorite Freedom shows because you got two matches that just clicked and got the crowd into both of them, which can be hard for these non-Jun Kasai deathmatch shows. Minoru Fujita would come out and challenge Kasai for the title at the next Corgan Hall show, and then Kasai and Takeda would agree to wrestle one another at the Christmas deathmatch show, although that plan would end up being changed at the end of the year, and they would never end up having that match again, still to this day.
Isami Kodaka and Masashi Takeda would face off on April 14th in Sapporo to determine who would become the #1 contender for the Big Japan Deathmatch title. Can you go over this match for everyone?
Yeah, so this is going to be the finals of a tournament to determine who's going to challenge Masaya Takahashi for his Big Japan Deathmatch title at the Yokohama Bunker Gym show on May 5th. And it's going to be a fluorescent light tubes deathmatch, with Takeda starting off by just throwing Kodaka into the light tubes against the ropes, with Kodaka returning the favor and then just smashing a light tube over Takeda's head, and then just begin using that light tube to cut open Takeda before throwing him into the light tubes again against the ropes. Kodaka would then grab a stack of light tubes, but Takeda would end up just kicking them and breaking them across Kodaka, as Takeda would end up pulling out his knife and just begin using it to cut open Kodaka. Takeda would then look to hit Kodaka with a brainbuster, but Kodaka would be the one to pick up Takeda instead and nail him with one. Kodaka would then pick up some light tubes, but be met with a dropkick from Takeda, breaking those light tubes across his body, and then Takeda would end up just taking a stack of light tubes and just run right into Kodaka, followed by hitting him with an exploder. Takeda would then pull out a board with knives on it and bring it into the ring and try to slam Kodaka onto it, but Kodaka would block it and manage to slam Takeda onto the knives board instead. Kodaka would then place a chair over Takeda's head and come off the top, smashing it with another chair, before going up to the top again and hit a diving knee drop with Takeda picking Kodaka up, but Kodaka would then roll Takeda up for a 2 count, with both of them getting up at the same time, and then Takeda would end up nailing Kodaka with a German suplex, with Kodaka getting up and nailing Takeda with the lariat. Kadaka would then go to the outside and pull out from under the ring this huge ladder and bring it into the ring and climb it up, but Takeda would get up and superplex Kadaka off the ladder and cover him for 2. Takeda would then place a stack of light tubes and kick them, breaking the light tubes across Kadaka, and then cover him, and with Kadaka clearly kicking out at 2, but for whatever reason the graphic would pop up saying winner Masashi Takeda instantly, before Takeda would end up just hitting Kadaka with a reverse U-crash and cover him, but Kadaka would again kick out. Takeda would then begin laying light tubes over Kadaka's body and go up to the top, but Kadaka would get up and smash the light tube over Takeda's head and then hit him with the Spanish fly, breaking the stack of light tubes, followed by a kick to the back of the head and then a knee to the face and cover him, but Takeda would kick out. Kadaka would then nail Takeda with a brainbuster and go up to the top of the ladder and dive off of it with a knee drop and cover Takeda, but Takeda would still kick out, so Kadaka would just place light tubes over Takeda and go up to the top of the ladder again and then come off of it, breaking the light tubes and cover Takeda to get the win. This was good. It wasn't nearly the level of their amazing Korakuen Hall match the year before, but it was going to be hard to top that, especially considering that this was not at Korakuen Hall and the fans really did not help this match out. They tried to take a part of that match and incorporate it into this match, and that's when things picked up. So overall, it served its purpose, despite it not being anywhere near the match of the year like match they had last. Then you had the winner screen popping up incorrectly, as this aired live, but obviously with Kadaka winning, I wonder if they messed up on purpose, acting like the 2 count was so close that they thought Takeda had won it. Although the problem with that is that the 2 count did not even come close to being a 3 count. Now Takeda pretty much is just going to be out of the Big Japan title picture going forward following this match, as it's one of those, you got your long run with it, now it's time for someone else to have it. It's going to be Kadaka's time this year, as he's going to challenge Takahashi for the Big Japan Deathmatch title at the annual May 5th Yokohama Bunka Gym show.
Freedoms would return to Korakuen Hall on May 2nd, with Jun Kasai once again defending the King of Freedom World Championship. Can you go over the top matches as well as how the show did?
So the announced a crowd of 985 fans, which, even though it was a little bit short of 1,000, I would consider this a success, since last year's show with Takeda and Violento Jack, which seemed like a much bigger match, only drew 957 fans, so it did a little bit better than last year. So like I said, I would consider it a success, as Jun Kasai is obviously a draw, even when he's taking on someone like Minoru Fujita here, who's not at the level that he's at as far as drawing or popularity goes. And on this show, Mama Sasaki and Violento Jack, they're going to have a special tag partner in Masato Tanaka, and they're going to take on Takashi Sasaki, Yuko Miyamoto, and Toru Sugiura in a hardcore match. And this match would start with Sugiura and Tanaka facing off, with Sugiura nailing Tanaka with the dropkick. But Mammoth would come right in with a ladder over his head and hit Sugiura with it, but Miyamoto would end up sending Mammoth with the ladder still over his head into the turnbuckle. Miyamoto would then take that ladder, and each side would end up doing a tug-of-war with it, with Tanaka being the driving force to send Sugiura, Miyamoto, and Takashi into the corner. Mammoth would then take that ladder and just kick it right in Sugiura's crotch while he was in the corner, and then smash a chair over Sugiura's back, which would get Sugiura right in Mammoth's face, although he would end up just chopping Sugiura back down. Tanaka would come in, and they would begin exchanging strikes with one another, before Tanaka would end up sending Sugiura into the corner, where he would end up jumping up to the top and dive onto Tanaka. Jack would then come in, and Sugiura and him would begin striking one another, with Jack going to the outside along with everyone else, as Sugiura would end up hitting a tope con hilo onto everybody on the outside. Jack and Sugiura would then get back in the ring, with Jack dropping Sugiura on the ladder and covering him, but Miyamoto would manage to make the save. Jack would then try to send Sugiura in the corner, but he would reverse it and suplex Jack in the corner on the ladder, and then pick Jack up and hit a Fire Thunder on him, followed by hitting him with an Over Easy and cover him and get the win. This was a fun mid-card match designed to help get Sugiura over, as he's pretty much booked as the star of this match. And then the next match is going to be Masashi Takeda taking on Jintaro. This is Jintaro's 20th anniversary match, so that's why he's pretty high up in the card, as Jintaro has pretty much just become an undercard wrestler for Freedoms due to his stroke that he suffered back in 2012, but he has a job for life with Freedoms due to his connection with Takashi Sasaki and just being with the promotion at the beginning. So even though he's not the same wrestler he was 10 years ago, he will always have a spot here in Freedoms. And this match would start with Jintaro sending Takeda over the top rope and then diving onto him, and then grab a chair, and he would hit himself in the head right in front of the referee. So I don't know what Jintaro was trying to do here before he would end up just throwing Takeda back in the ring. Jintaro would then work on Takeda's knee and put him in the figure four leg lock around the turnbuckle, followed by a figure four leg lock in the ring. Jintaro would then end up hitting multiple backdrops on Takeda, followed by putting him in an octopus hold that he would bring to the mat and cover him, with Takeda kicking out, as Jintaro has been on the offense the entire match and the crowd is still responding, although not much has really happened. Jintaro would then climb up to the top rope, but Takeda would meet him there and suplex him off the turnbuckle and then cover him with Jintaro kicking out. Jintaro would then poke Takeda in the eye, but then Takeda would end up just grabbing Jintaro and rolling him up and putting him in a cross arm breaker before Jintaro would manage to get out and roll Takeda up with a ghetto clutch, with Takeda managing to kick out. Takeda would then get up and grab Jintaro and hit him with the German suplex, with Jintaro kicking out, followed by hitting him with another one, and this time it would get the win. Jintaro had control almost the entire match. So again, not really that much happened here, as Shintaro really can only have a slow basic match at this point, and that's what this was. But like I said, the crowd reacted pretty nicely, even though really not that much happened. Then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai taking on Minoru Fujita for the King of Freedom World Championship. This is going to be a Razor Crossboard death match, and it would start with Fujita wearing a bag over his head, jumping Kasai right away as he was entering the ring on the turnbuckle, posing for the crowd, as he would suplex Kasai off the turnbuckle, with Kasai no-selling it, as they would go face-to-face, with Kasai wearing a nice outfit with a tie, and then Fujita would just allow Kasai to take off his dress shirt while still wearing his bag over his head, as they would do the pose with the belt before the match. So, weird start to this match. Fujita would then get introduced and take the bag off his head, and they would both begin giving each other the middle finger as the match would finally start. Fujita would then charge at Kasai, but Kasai would move out of the way, and Fujita would end up going face first into the Razor Crossboard, and then Kasai would take Fujita and suplex him on a chair, and then bring out the potted plant vases, but Fujita would grab that chair from Kasai before he would break them, but then Kasai would grab the chair from Fujita and smash it over his head. Kasai would then throw Fujita in the corner and charge at him, but Fujita would move out of the way and then throw Kasai headfirst into the Razor Crossboard. Fujita would then pull out a cheese grater and begin using it on Kasai's forehead, and then Fujita would begin breaking the potted plant vases and try to slam Kasai on them, but Kasai would headbutt Fujita and then slam him onto the broken vases instead, and then Kasai would bring in a stack of light tubes and place them in the corner and pick Fujita up and send him headfirst into the light tubes without them breaking, so Kasai would just end up throwing his head into them with them breaking this time, followed by hitting him with a lariat and cover Fujita, but he would manage to kick out. Kasai would then hit Fujita with a reverse tiger driver, but then he would go for another one, with Fujita ramming his back into the Razor Crossboard. Fujita would then break off the Razor Crossboard and give half of it to Kasai and keep the other half, as they would begin smashing the Razor Crossboards over their heads, with Fujita getting the upper hand of it, as he would charge at Kasai, but being met with a lariat. Fujita would then head out to the outside, as Kasai would end up bringing out a table and set it up right at the entranceway of Corrigan Hall and try to suplex Fujita off the stage, but Fujita would manage to reverse it and pick Kasai up and hit a Fire Thunder off the stage, sending Kasai through the table. Although the Fire Thunder would be far from perfect, it's a spot I still love every time I see it. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Fujita would end up hitting Kasai with a really safe looking tombstone, followed by a reverse tiger driver. Fujita would then pull out a light tube and go up to the top, but Kasai would end up hitting the ropes, causing Fujita to slip and fall into the light tube he was holding, breaking it, and then Kasai would end up suplexing Fujita off the turnbuckle. They would end up both hitting each other with lariats, with Fujita deciding that he's had enough of this and pull out a taser, but Kasai would end up nailing him with the lariat and then deliver a reverse tiger driver and cover Fujita, but Fujita would manage to kick out. Kasai would then go up to the top for a Pearl Harbor splash, but Fujita would get up and use his taser on Kasai's leg, causing him to slip, as Fujita would then pick up Kasai and hit him with the tombstone pile driver off the turnbuckle and cover him, but Kasai would still kick out, as the crowd is starting to really get into this match. They would both get up, and Kasai would end up nailing Fujita with the lariat and then cover him, but he would end up kicking out at one. So Kasai would grab a part of the Razor Crossboard and hit a reverse tiger driver on him on it, but again Fujita would kick out when Kasai would cover him. Fujita then out of nowhere would roll Kasai up with a Samson clutch for two in a really cool out of nowhere spot, but then Kasai would end up slamming Fujita and then go up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash, breaking several light tubes over Fujita, but again Fujita would kick out after being covered. The fans are now screaming for Fujita here, as Kasai would end up hitting him with a reverse Tiger Driver and cover him and finally put him away to defend the King of Freedom World title here. Fujita death matches are always different than the norm, which is a good thing with so many of these matches being the same. And I thought the match that Fujita had with Masaaka back in 2017 was awesome. This match, the first part of it, I hated. But I have to say the second half was a lot better, and the crowd got so into it. So I will say that this match, even though, like I said, the first 10 minutes of it was just Fujita trying to have a different match, and it was just not clicking before it did. Still, no match on the show came close to either the great Kasai and Fukimoto or Takeda and Sugiura matches that took place on the March Corrigan Hall show.
Isami Kodaka would challenge for the Big Japan Deathmatch Heavyweight title against Takahashi on May 5th at the Yokohama Bunka Gym. Can you go over what happened in this match?
So this is going to be a fluorescent light tubes death match, and this is going to start with both of them taking light tubes and just smashing them over one another's heads, with Kodaka getting the upper end of it and smashing multiple light tubes over Takahashi's head until Takahashi would look to escape by heading to the outside. Kodaka would then see that and try for a tope, but he would end up getting met with a light tube to the face by Takahashi, and then Takahashi would take Kodaka and hit him with a brainbuster on the apron as they would both fall to the outside. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Takahashi would end up sending Kodaka in the corner where he would go through a light tube tower as Takahashi would just begin smashing Kodaka's head with light tubes to complete silence from the crowd. Takahashi would then take Kodaka and just begin rubbing his back up against the glass on the mat, and then Takahashi would take his shirt off and just smash more light tubes over Kodaka's head. Takahashi would then charge at Kodaka in the corner, but Kodaka would move out of the way and deliver a kick to Takahashi's head, and then take the other light tube tower in the corner and dive off of the top, breaking it across Takahashi while kicking him. Kodaka would then look to slam Takahashi on a huge stack of light tubes, but Takahashi would manage to throw Kodaka down onto it instead, and then look to hit a powerbomb on Kodaka on a huge stack of light tubes. But Kodaka would get away and hit this awkward-looking Hurricane Rana as Takahashi would just flip himself into the light tubes and break them. Kodaka would then bust out a huge ladder and climb up to the top, with Takahashi climbing it up as well, and superplexing Kodaka off the ladder, which would get the crowd to react while they were coming down, but then they would go back to just being quiet moments later. Takahashi would then go for a jackhammer, but Kodaka would end up rolling him up and then deliver a super kick to him, followed by hitting an exploder on a stack of light tubes, and then Kodaka would climb up to the top of the ladder again and hit a diving double knee drop and cover Takahashi, with Takahashi kicking out, which would get a reaction from the crowd. Kodaka would then grab a light tube, but Takahashi would end up taking it from him and smash it over his head, and then take him down and try for a jackhammer, but Kodaka would manage to reverse it and hit a brain buster, and then nail him with the super kick and cover him and get the win. This was not good. It didn't help that the crowd was dead silent for most of it, but at this point it was time for the Takahashi era to end, as he is just not the guy, and the only good matches he had were based on the other guy. He tries, but he just doesn't have it. Kodaka is obviously an amazing worker, but this just never clicked, as they were breaking light tubes over one another's head to no one reacting until they started doing spots with the ladder at the end. Kodaka is now the Big Japan Deathmatch Heavyweight Champion, as hopefully this will provide better matches going forward.
Jun Kasai would then defend the King of Freedom World Championship in Osaka against Kamui on June 2nd. Will you go over this match for everybody?
Yeah, so this show is getting put on by Kamui, and he's booked himself a match against Jun Kasai for the King of Freedom World title in a scaffold, glass board, fluorescent light tubes death match. This match would start off with Kamui delivering a drop kick right away, and then hitting a Hurricane Rana, sending Kasai to the outside, followed by Kamui hitting an Asai moonsault off the turnbuckle onto Kasai on the outside. Kamui would then throw Kasai back in the ring and grab a stack of light tubes and go up to the top and toss them to Kasai, with him catching them, as Kamui would end up delivering a drop kick, breaking the light tubes across Kasai. Kamui would then begin to climb up the scaffold, but Kasai would get up and begin pulling him down from it, and then Kamui, he would try to send Kasai into the turnbuckle in the corner, but Kasai would manage to reverse it and send Kamui flying into the corner through the glass board, as that would get a really good reaction from the crowd. Kasai would then take some of the glass and just begin cutting Kamui's arm with it, before placing a stack of light tubes in Kamui's shirt and slam him onto it. Kamui would then manage to come back and nail Kasai with a Hurricane Rana off the turnbuckle, buckle, followed by delivering a tiger driver to him, but Kasai would manage to kick out when Kamui would cover him. Kamui would then go up to the top and deliver a firebird splash, but Kasai would move out of the way and then hit him with the lariat and then pick him up on his shoulders and drop him face first into some light tubes set up in the turnbuckle, followed by placing the glass board on a stack of chairs over Kamui as Kasai would climb up to the top of the scaffold, but Kamui would manage to get up and go up to the top of the scaffold as well. Kasai would then set up like he was going to hit a reverse tiger driver on Kamui off the scaffold, but Kamui would manage to escape and deliver a kick to Kasai, causing him to fall off the scaffold onto the glass board in an awesome spot, followed by Kamui taking his shirt off and hitting Kasai with a Rakurakai knee drop off the scaffold and cover him, but Kasai would manage to kick out. Kamui would then climb up the scaffold again, but Kasai would go up as well, and Kasai would end up suplexing Kamui off the top of the scaffold. And then Kasai would end up nailing Kamui with a reverse tiger driver and cover him, but Kamui would manage to kick out. Kasai would then climb up to the top of the scaffold again and hit a Pearl Harbor splash off the top of it and cover him, but Kamui would still kick out. So Kasai would break a light tube and begin cutting his own chest and nail Kamui with a stimulation pile driver and finally manage to put Kamui away for the 3 count. So this match was really good and the spots in it were incredible. There was a lot of lag time in between the spots though, so this doesn't make it into the top of the great Kasai matches of all time. But still, it's one of Kamui's best matches and something he can be proud of. Kasai afterwards would end up offering Kamui a spot in his Unchained group following the match, with Kamui turning it down because, like I said, this was his show that he was putting on, and he probably didn't want to technically join a heel group, even though Unchained really hadn't been a heel group for a couple years now. But he would end up eventually joining the group at the next show a couple weeks later, so Kamui going forward is going to be a part of the Unchained group with Kasai.
Jun Kasai would then defend the King of Freedom World Championship, this time in Sendai against Takashi Sasaki on June 15th. What ended up taking place in this match?
Yeah, so this match is going to be held in a smaller building, as Takashi Sasaki and Kasai is not something that's going to draw a great number at Corrigan Hall anymore. So it's a match that can make a sponsor for the show really happy, since technically these two are the biggest names in the promotion. So they're going to do this match for the title on a smaller scale, and it's going to be a fluorescent light tubes death match. Takashi, he would send Kasai first into the light tubes, but he would try it again, and Kasai would manage to reverse it and send Takashi into the light tubes attached to the ropes. Kasai would then throw Takashi into the corner and grab a stack of light tubes and charge at him, but Takashi would move out of the way and just begin kicking the light tubes, breaking them across Kasai, and then just grab a stack of light tubes and then toss them at Kasai. Takashi would then pull out a large stack of light tubes from under the ring and powerbomb Kasai onto them and cover him, but Kasai would manage to kick out, as Kasai would act like he was dead, but then get up right away and just begin striking Takashi and nail him with a reverse tiger driver and cover him with Takashi kicking out. Kasai would then go up to the top, but Takashi would end up climbing up as well and suplex Kasai off the turnbuckle, with Kasai getting up right away and then try for a lariat, but miss, as Takashi would end up nailing him with the lariat. Takashi would then take a stack of light tubes and hit Kasai with the D-Geist on them and cover him, but Kasai would kick out and just give the double middle fingers to Takashi. Takashi would then take a stack of light tubes next to Kasai's head and try for a kick to break them, but Kasai would move out of the way and try to smash them over Takashi's head, but he would block it and take them and just smash them over Kasai's head, who would no-sell it and lariat Takashi as they would both fall to the mat. They would both make it up to their feet at a 9 count and begin slapping one another, with Takashi getting the upper hand and trying for a reverse tiger driver, but Kasai would reverse it and hit him with it instead, and cover Takashi with Takashi kicking out. Kasai would then take a box of light tubes and place them over Takashi and go up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash and cover him, but Takashi would again kick out. Kasai would then give Takashi the kiss of death and hit him with the stimulation pile driver on a stack of light tubes, but again Takashi would kick out, so Kasai would end up just hitting another one, this time without light tubes, and this time it would get the win, as Kasai would end up successfully defending the King of Freedom World title here. This was okay, it picked up at the end, but a majority of the match just felt like they were going through the motions, as it had such a house show feel to it. But again, at the very end, things picked up to where I would consider it a good match, but definitely not at the level of Kasai and Kamui from a couple weeks earlier.
Jun Kasai would promote a show at Corrigan Hall on July 3rd, with Kasai having a special non-title match. Can you go over why this match was not for a title, the top matches, and how the show did?
So they announced a crowd of 701 fans for this show, which is down considerably compared to last year where they drew 815 fans. So I would have to say the big aspect of this show not doing as well as last year was the fact that the King of Freedom World title was not on the line, as Jun Kasai is just going to take on Toru Sugiura in a non-title match here. And the reason that this was a non-title match with Sugiura just facing off against Kasai, as Kasai had stated that Sugiura had not earned a title match yet, so this is more of a trial period for Sugiura to see where he stands against the best of the best when it comes to death matches, as they're going to continue to build Sugiura here to eventually become the ace of the promotion. And on this show, Kamui, who has now joined Kasai's Unchained group, like I mentioned earlier, he's going to go up against his longtime friend and teacher, Mama Sasaki, as this is a continuation of their series from a decade ago in WMF and the early days of Freedoms. This is going to be a hardcore match with Kamui throwing a ladder right away at Mammoth's face to get the match started, and then Kamui, he would end up sending Mammoth out of the ring and grab a barbed wire bat and just begin using it on Mammoth before Mammoth would end up getting a hold of it and just nail Kamui with it. Mammoth would then look to throw Kamui into the turnbuckle, but Kamui would manage to reverse it, and then Kamui would end up pulling out a large screw and just begin cutting open Mammoth with it, as Kamui would then end up sending Mammoth out of the ring and deliver a Hurricane Rana and then try for an Asai moonsault, but Mammoth would end up grabbing his leg and just throw him face down on the apron and then drop a ladder on him. Mammoth would then set up a ladder on a stack of chairs and look to powerbomb Kamui off the apron, but Kamui would manage to get away and instead suplex Mammoth off the apron on the ladder. Kamui would then take Mammoth and bulldog him on a chair and then dropkick the chair in Mammoth's face. Kamui would then go up to the top and get smacked right in the face by Mammoth, followed by Mammoth putting a chair over Kamui's head and hitting him with the Mammoth home run and then chokeslam him off the top. Mammoth would then go for a clothesline with Kamui ducking it and then hitting a Pele kick to him, followed by putting a chair over Mammoth's head and hitting him with the Mammoth home run, as Kamui would then go up to the top of the ladder and dive off of it and cover Mammoth, but he would end up getting up and just nail Kamui with a 29 years old, and then Mammoth would end up taking a barbed wire bat and swing at Kamui, with Kamui ducking it and spitting green mist in Mammoth's face and roll him up with Mammoth kicking out at 2. Kamui would then try to suplex Mammoth on the barbed wire bat, which would be a big mistake as Mammoth would overpower him and just drop him on the bat instead. Mammoth would then end up taking the barbed wire bat and just putting it in Kamui's shirt and once again hit him with the 29 years old and this time get the win. This picked up a little bit towards the end, and I like both guys, but this was pretty standard, if not a boring match, but it got decent towards the end. Then you have Masashi Takeda, Minoru Fujita, and Kenji Fukimoto taking on Violento Jack, Mito Extremo, and Sikape in a weapons death match. Unchained, they would start off by jumping Las Namadas, as Takeda would end up throwing Mito into the ropes, with Mito coming back and hitting a Hurricane Rana to him. They would end up sending the Unchained wrestlers to the outside, as Sikape would end up hitting a tope onto them, followed by an Asai moonsault from Mito, before Takeda would end up diving off the top onto everyone on the outside as well. Takeda and Mito would then get back in the ring, with Mito putting down a chair with thumbtacks on it, as he would end up super kicking Takeda, causing him to sit down on the thumbtacks, but then Mito would end up charging at him, and Takeda would end up delivering a drop toe hold, sending Mito face first into the thumbtacks. Jack would then come in and slam Takeda and bring in a box with straw needles and then lay them over Takeda, but as he would go to jump off the top, Fukimoto would throw one of them and then attach his fishing hook to Jack's mouth and begin using his fishing pole to send Jack flying off the top onto the straw needles. Fukimoto would then look to hit a package pile driver, but Jack would avoid it and then deliver a kick to the head, followed by a running senton onto Fukimoto, with him landing onto the straw needles. Fujita and Sikape would then get in the ring, with Fujita grabbing a bucket, but Sikape would end up hitting Fujita with the bucket and then pull out the broken glass from it and lay it in the ring, as Sikape would deliver a drop toe hold, sending Fujita face first into the broken glass, followed by hitting a curb stomp onto him. Sikape would then try for a powerbomb, but Vegeta would manage to flip him over and then place Sikape in a crossface on the broken glass, with Jack and Mito having to make the save. Jack and Sikape would then place a barbed wire board over Fukimoto, as Sikape would go up to the top, with Fukimoto getting up right away and going up to the top as well. Jack and Mito would then go up to the top as well, followed by Vegeta and Takeda coming over and just throwing them off the top, with Sikape kind of eventually falling into the barbed wire board. Takeda would then charge at Mito, but Mito would end up delivering another drop toe hold, sending Takeda into the ropes, where he would end up getting kicked in the face by Sikape. They would then place a barbed wire board over Takeda, while Jack would hold his legs, and Mito would lift Sikape, fly flying onto the barbed wire over Takeda's back. Jack would then deliver a suicide plancha on Fukimoto and Fujita, as Sikaplay would end up delivering a double foot stomp on Takeda, with barbed wire still stuck on Takeda's head, as Sikaplay would then place the barbed wire board over Takeda, and Sikaplay would dive off the top onto it and cover Takeda to get the win. This was a surprising result, as Takeda is usually always protected and rarely takes pinfall losses in tag matches. This was an entertaining match though, but the crowd being so light, there wasn't that much electricity in the air for it, but everything they did made for this to be a pretty short, fun, entertaining match. Afterwards, Mama Sasaki would get in the ring, and this would be the first time that Sikaplay and Mito would be in Japan since Jack and Mammoth had formed their tag team earlier in the year, as they would offer Mammoth a spot in Los Namadas, with him taking it, as they would all put on their Los Namadas shirts and pose for the cameras, before Unchained would hit the ring and attack them all and clear the ring of them. Then the main event's going to be a fluorescent light tubes razor cross board death match between Jun Kasai and Toru Sugiura. This would start with both Sugiura and Kasai grabbing light tubes and begin smashing them over one another's head, followed by Sugiura throwing Kasai into the light tubes connected to the ropes, with Sugiura charging at Kasai, but Kasai would move out of the way as Sugiura would go face first into the razor cross board. Sugiura would come back and just throw Kasai head first into the razor board, with Kasai no-selling it and just smiling with blood running down his face, as Kasai would just toss Sugiura into more light tubes attached into the ropes, followed by hitting a DDT to him into the razor crossboard and then smashing a light tube over his head. Kasai would then throw Sugiura in the corner, but he would end up jumping onto the top rope and dive off of it onto Kasai, as Sugiura would then take a stack of light tubes and go up to the top again and toss them to Kasai, with him catching them, as Sugiura would end up coming off the top and deliver a flying dropkick, breaking the light tubes across Kasai. Sugiura would then set up a board with knives on a stack of chairs, but Kasai would come over and set Sugiura up on the top and smash a light tube over his head, and then look to suplex him, but Sugiura would get under Kasai and powerbomb him onto the knives board, as Kasai would quickly go to the outside, but Sugiura would then dive over the top rope onto Kasai on the outside. Sugiura would then bring Kasai back in the ring and just begin striking light tubes, breaking them across him before smashing one over his head, and then place more over him while laying in the corner, as Sugiura would then deliver a diving flip in the corner, breaking the light tubes over Kasai. Sugiura would then place more light tubes across Kasai and go for a running elbow, but Kasai would move out of the way and then headbutt those light tubes across Sugiura's head. The fans are now chanting for Kasai, as he would end up hitting a pile driver and then a lariat on Sugiura and cover him, but Sugiura would manage to kick out. Kasai would then follow that up with hitting a reverse tiger driver, but Sugiura would again kick out when Kasai would cover him, and then Kasai would end up placing a stack of light tubes over Sugiura and go up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash, breaking those light tubes over Sugiura, but Sugiura would get up instantly and hit Kasai with an over easy. Sugiura would then get up and toss a razor cross board to Kasai, as he would get one as well, and they would just begin smashing them over each other's heads, with Kasai getting the better end of it and then delivering a German suplex to Sugiura, with him getting up instantly, but Kasai would just nail him with the DDT, and then he would end up hitting another reverse tiger driver and look to hit another on a stack of light tubes, but Sugiura would end up headbutting Kasai and then deliver his own stimulation pile driver to Kasai on a stack of light tubes. Sugiura would then place another stack of light tubes across Kasai and hit a running elbow, breaking them over Kasai, and then lift Kasai up and hit it over easy once again, with Kasai getting up right away and just punch Sugiura in the face, and then take some light tubes and just run them into the back of Sugiura, although that spot would not work out too well, with maybe one breaking, as Kasai would then just pick up Sugiura and hit him with the one-winged angel and cover him, but Sugiura would still manage to kick out. Kasai, sensing the end, would then place a razor cross board on the mat and hit another reverse tiger driver on Sugiura, but he would still kick out, as the crowd would pop for that one. Kasai would then give Sugiura the kiss of death and hit him with the stimulation pile driver and cover him, and this time get the win. This was good, and Sugiura looked really good here as they killed each other. The lack of crowd again hurt this match though, as they were doing so much here, but there just wasn't enough people in the building to make this like they were doing something that really stood out as anything special. Kasai and Sugiura would end up fist bumping afterwards, as Sugiura had earned Kasai's respect for this match, as the losing to build up Sugiura is going to stop here, and now the winning to build him up to challenge for Kasai's title in the next step of this process of pushing Sugiura as a top guy.
Atsushi Onita would come back from his double knee surgery in less than 5 months to hold his own show on July 13th at Shinkiba. Can you go over what happened in this match?
Yeah, so after 5 months of being out of action due to double knee replacement surgery, which Kijimoto got the same surgery and it caused him to be out of action for 13 months, Onita, he's coming back to the ring for this promoted show that put on by him, and it's going to be him teaming up with Riki Fuji and Hideki Osaka to take on Tomohiko Hashimoto, Onryo, Leatherface in an exploding barbed wire bat, barbed wire board death match, and this match would start with Onita throwing his jacket at Hashimoto right away, and then managing to suplex him before bringing in a table and pile driving Onryo through it. The heels would end up throwing Onita into the barbed wire board, and then they would all end up going outside Shinkiba as Leatherface would hold Onita, with Hashimoto turning on the exploding barbed wire bat and hitting him with it. They would end up getting back in the building and back in the ring as Onryo would end up holding Onita, as Hashimoto would end up going for a barbed wire bat shot to him, but Onita would end up spitting red mist in his face, as Onita would end up taking the broken table piece and just begin smashing it over Onryo's head repeatedly. They would end up going back outside Shinkiba again, and this time, Onita would end up turning on the exploding bat and hit Leatherface with it before getting back in the ring and hitting him with a backdrop to pick up the win, as Onita would end up pouring water over his knees, so it's obvious his knees are still really bothering him here. Onita would end up taking the rest of the month off here after this match, as he probably came back a little too early, but he's going to come back under his old Onita schedule the next month of working a couple shows during the 1 week frame for the month.
Freedoms would then run a show again in Osaka on July 28th with Unchained versus Los Namados in a scaffold death match. Can you go over this match and the noticeable injury that took place during it?
Yeah, so this is the second year in a row that they're running inside this building in Osaka, as it was such a success last year, and it looks really good on video. This is going to be a scaffold, barbed wire board, fluorescent light tubes, glass board death match between Violento Jack, Mama Sasaki, Mito Extremo, and Seikope, taking on Jun Kasai, Masashi Takeda, Kamui, and Kinji Fukimoto. And this match would start with all of them brawling right away, with Takeda and Fukimoto taking light tubes and just charging at Mito and Seikope, with them moving out of the way as Takeda and Fukimoto would end up running into one another with the light tubes, and then head to the outside as Seikope would end up hitting a tope, and then Mito would end up hitting a moonsault off the turnbuckle to the outside on everyone. They would all end up brawling around the building as Kasai would end up placing Jack on this metal guardrail set up on chairs, as Kasai would begin climbing up one of the trucks in the back that was there to set up the ring. But by the time he was on top of the truck looking to dive off of it, he would see that Jack was now gone, as Kasai would look confused on where Jack was until Jack would end up popping up from behind on the top of the truck as well. Kasai would then suplex Jack on the top of the truck, but Jack would end up hitting Kasai low and then pick him up and just toss Kasai off the top of the truck onto the metal guardrail in a spot that would really mess Kasai up, as Kasai would begin holding his knee as he was in a lot of pain here, more so than the usual in this insane bump. Jack would then get down off the truck and just toss Kasai on the guardrail and walk away, allowing Kasai time to gather himself. As Mammoth and Kamui, they would end up getting back in the ring, and Mammoth would end up setting a glass board in the corner and try to throw Kamui into it, with Kamui stopping himself just short, and then Mammoth would charge at Kamui, but Kamui would move out of the way, so Mammoth would end up putting a chair over Kamui's head and hit him with the Mammoth home run, causing him to go flying into the glass board in a cool spot. Los Namados would enjoy the 4-on-3 advantage with Kasai out of the picture until Takeda would end up grabbing Jack and Mammoth and double suplex them onto a barbed wire board, as Kasai would finally manage to get back in the ring and hold Mammoth and Jack, with Kamui diving off the scaffold onto both of them. Mito would then come off the middle rope with the dropkick and then German suplex Kasai before charging at him, but he would end up being met with a boot as Kasai would end up pulling out skewers and stick them in Mito's head and then deliver a pile driver and then hit a lariat to Mito. Kasai would then go up to the top of the scaffold and dive off of it with a Pearl Harbor splash and cover Mito, but Jack would manage to make the save for him. Kasai would then go for a reverse tiger driver, but Mammoth would come in and hit a lariat on him, as Seikope would go up to the top of the scaffold with a light tube and dive off of it onto Fukimoto and cover him, with Takeda having to make the save. Seikope would then come in with the light tube, but be met with a dropkick from Takeda, followed by a suplex off the top onto the barbed wire board, with Seikope no-selling it, getting up right away before getting hit with another German suplex, and then finished off with a reverse U-crash from Takeda to get the win. So Takeda gets his win back over Ciclope here. This was fun, as these Osaka shows in July always seem to be crazy, although this was definitely a lot more tamer than last year, and there was no fire or cars being used on this show. Although the craziest spot in this match, with Jack throwing Kasai off the truck, would do some serious damage to Kasai, as he would really be struggling at the end of the year and need time off to recover because of how badly he was injured, with the biggest amount of damage with him being from this match being thrown off the truck. Still, like I said, a good crazy match like always, as this place has a great location, although sadly it would be the last time they would run this show at this building, as they have not gone back the next 2 years due to the pandemic.
Jun Kasai and Violento Jack would have a special singles match on August 4th in Kumamoto for the King of Freedom World Championship. Can you go over how this match came to be?
This is going to be very similar to last year, when a promotion sponsored a Freedom show that had Kasai versus Violento Jack as the main event in a big show that they had rented in Odate. This show is going to be sponsored by Kumamoto Pro, with Kasai and Jack once again main eventing, this time for the King of Freedom World Championship in a glass board weapons death match. And Kasai, he would end up trying to send Jack into the glass board in the corner, with Jack reversing it and sending Kasai into the other glass board on the other side of the ring instead. Jack would then bring out a broken can board and try to suplex Kasai onto it, but Kasai would manage to reverse it and suplex Jack onto it. Kasai would then go up to the top and hit a diving headbutt, and then place the other glass board over Jack's body and go up to the top, but Jack would get up and go up to the top, but Kasai would end up just shoving Jack off the turnbuckle, sending him through the glass board, and then Kasai would end up hitting a Pearl Harbor splash on Jack, with Jack getting up right away and hitting a brainbuster on Kasai, but Kasai would get up and nail Jack with a lariat, and then pick him up and hit a one-winged angel, and then a reverse tiger driver, and then go up to the top for another Pearl Harbor splash, this time on a stack of light tubes, and cover Jack to get the win and defend the King of Freedom World title once again.
An FMW group would be formed in Big Japan on August 18th in Osaka, as they would take on the Big Japan team. Can you go over who was in this FMW team and what took place in the match?
So I talked about it last episode, how the Super Battle FMW promotion had closed down now, so the FMW name is only going to be used as a part of a group for random shows. So this show, it's going to be the FMW team taking on the Big Japan team in a scrumble bunkhouse death match, with Tetsuhiro Kuroda, Raijin Yaguchi, Hideki Osaka, and Leatherface as the FMW team taking on Ryuji Ito, Abdullah Kobayashi, Minoru Fujita, and Kenkaro Hoshino as the Big Japan team. And this match will start with Kuroda running to the ring to grab the bat first, and then they would end up brawling around ringside, with Ito and Kuroda doing the FMW dueling chair spot, with Ito getting the better end of it, and then Yaguchi would end up using the barbed wire bat to cut open Kobayashi before Kobayashi would end up grabbing a chair, but Yaguchi would end up knocking away with the bat, and then just lay the barbed wire bat into Kobayashi's forehead some more, while Ito and Fujita would end up grabbing a rope and begin choking Kuroda with it. They would do the one member of each team come in and do a couple spots before getting out and letting two others do spots with one another, until Fujita and Hosaka, they would face off before Kobayashi would climb up to the top with the bull rope and just dive off of it, but land short of Osaka and sell injuring his knee, with Osaka just kicking it. Yaguchi would then come in and begin hitting his knee with the barbed wire bat, followed by Kuroda coming over and placing a chair next to Kobayashi's crotch and hit it with the barbed wire bat, before Yaguchi would come in again and begin using the barbed wire bat on Kobayashi. Leatherface would get tagged in and just charge at Kobayashi, who would drop Leatherface down and nail him with the Shining Wizard, and then tag out to Hoshino, who would come in and just get nailed with a bat shot by Yaguchi. Hosaka would then try to hit Hoshino with the barbed wire bat, but he would move out of the way, and Hosaka would end up accidentally hitting Yaguchi with it instead. They would then throw Yaguchi in the corner, where not only Hoshino and Fujita would charge at him, but all the Big Japan young boys would come in the ring, and they would charge at him as well, with Kobayashi dropping an elbow onto him, with Leatherface having to make the save. Hoshino would then go for a senton on a stack of chairs, but Yaguchi would move out of the way, and Kuroda would come over and hit the Tekken Buster on him, followed by an Olympic slam for Yaguchi, with the Big Japan team having to make the save. Yaguchi would then finish Hoshino off with a lariat and get the pin for the FMW win, as this obviously shows that FMW was the far superior promotion than Big Japan. This was a fun for a house show type main event, where pretty much everyone in this match was either in their 40s or 50s, but they were still able to do what they needed to do to make this work, even though it seemed like a night off for everyone on the Big Japan team besides Kobayashi.
Super Fireworks would run at Kawasaki on August 19th, with Masada Tanaka having 2 wrestlers from his past accompany him to the ring in his exploding bat tag match. Can you go over who they were and what happened in the match?
So Tanaka would team up with 0-1 wrestler Hyde Kabata here, as they would end up coming out with Kentaro Kanemaru, who no longer needs a cane for the time being, as they would all do the Team No Respect dance together. And then Shoji Nakamaki, he would come out with a barbed wire board against his back, and they would all end up going to the ring and finish doing the Team No Respect dance before Taru and Chris Weiss, the opponents for Tanaka, they would come to the ring, and they're going to have an exploding barbed wire bat match with Taru turning on the exploding bat and nailing Kubata with it. And then Chris Weiss, he would end up grabbing Tanaka, and Taru would end up looking to hit Tanaka with the bat, but Kubata would manage to make the save, and Tanaka would get the bat from him and nail Weiss with the bat. Nakamaki would then throw in the barbed wire board in the ring, as Kubata would lay Weiss on the barbed wire board and go up to the top and hit Kanemaru's Bakayama Senton Splash and cover Weiss and get the win, to get the win for the Tanaka team. Afterwards, Kanemaru, Tanaka, Kubata, and other 0-1 wrestlers would get in the ring, and they would all do the Team No Respect dance for what is currently still the last time in wrestling.
GCW would make its debut in Japan with 2 shows at Shinkiba on August 22nd and August 23rd. Can you go over the main highlights of what took place both nights?
Yeah, so the American promotion GCW has gained quite the following in Japan as this crazy deathmatch promotion going on, and they would partner up with Freedoms here to hold 2 shows, with both of the shows selling out the small Shinkiba building, while a bunch of the wrestlers would also get bookings for other promotions throughout the week. The first show would have G-Raver, Jimmy Lloyd, and Drew Parker, who's a Big Japan wrestler, taking on Violento Jack, Mito Extremo, and Sikope in a death match. And this match would start with Jack grabbing a light tube when Drew would end up kicking him and knocking him down, and then deliver a stomp, breaking that light tube across Jack. Mito and Sikope would then grab some light tubes, with Jimmy Lloyd and G-Raver breaking them across Sikope, as Drew would be lifted up in the air by Jimmy and hit a 450 splash on Mito, followed by G-Raver hitting a swanton bomb on him to pick up the win as the crowd is pumped. Then you have Jun Kasai, Takashi Sasaki, and Toshiyuki Sakuda taking on Schlack, Marcus Crane, and Eric Ryan. As Takashi, he would end up getting the fishing hook in Crane's mouth, followed by Sakuda hitting a 619 on him. Kasai would then end up going up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash on a board with light tubes on it on Ryan, and then hit a reverse Tiger Driver on him and get the win here for the Japanese team, as Kasai and Sakuda would then look to shake hands afterwards, but Sakuda would end up giving him the middle finger. Then the main event's going to be Masashi Takeda taking on Alex Colon in a fluorescent light tubes death match, with both of them sending one another into the light tubes against the ropes. Takeda would then place Colon on a board and go up to the top and dive off of it, sending Colon through it. And then Takeda would end up squirting some lemon juice on Colon's cuts, and then pull out a cactus ball, and then take Colon up to the top with a light tube. But Colon would end up stomping on that light tube, bringing Takeda down with it, and then cover him but only get a 2 count. Takeda would then place the stack of light tubes behind Colon and hit a last ride powerbomb on him, and then kick those stack of light tubes against Colon and cover him, but Colon would kick out right away. Takeda would then pull out a board with knives on it and try for a reverse U-crash on it, but Colon would get away and then grab a stack of light tubes and hit a double knee, breaking the light tubes, sending Takeda into the knives, and then Colon would go up to the top and hit a guillotine leg drop on the knives board and cover Takeda and get the win in a surprise upset, as the crowd was so loud for this match. Then on the second show the next night, Mito Extremo and Sikope, they would take on Marcus Crane and Schlack, and this would start with Schlack just running right into Mito with light tubes, followed by Crane placing a spiked board over Sikope, and both Schlack and Crane would take Mito and just throw him into the spike boards pressed up against Sikope. Crane would then pour dry ice on a light tube board and DDT Mito off the turnbuckle through it, with Sikope having to make the save by smashing a light tube board over him. Schlack would then grab a weed whacker, and Sikope would end up grabbing it from him and use it on Schlack's stomach, followed by Mito hitting a 450 off the top and then picking Crane up and hitting him with the Fire Thunder to get the win, as this was another match where the crowd is just going insane for everything. Then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai taking on G-Raver in a fluorescent light tubes death match, and this would have G-Raver place Kasai on the entrance ramp with the light tube on him, and then G-Raver would go up to the top and dive off of it, breaking the light tube across Kasai. Kasai would go to the outside where G-Raver would look to go up to the top and deliver a dive to Kasai, but Kasai would grab a stack of light tubes and just throw them at G-Raver, with them exploding at him in an awesome looking spot. Kasai would then pull out the broken flower vases, but G-Raver would end up knocking Kasai down onto them, and then follow that up by hitting a suplex suplex onto the broken flower vases, and then G-Raver would end up placing a light tube with knives on them and dive off the top, but Kasai would end up turning it around, and G-Raver would end up hitting the knives part of the board. Kasai would then pick up G-Raver and hit a one-winged angel on a stack of light tubes, followed by going up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash with G-Raver kicking out. Kasai would then give G-Raver the kiss of death and hit him with the reverse tiger driver and pick up the win. Afterwards, all the GCW wrestlers and the Japanese wrestlers would end up getting in the ring and just begin yelling at one another, as the crowd for both of these shows were so alive and loud.
Big Japan would run their annual Death Mania show in Nagoya on August 25th, with Atsushi Onita making his Big Japan debut. Can you go over his match as well as the Big Japan Death Match title main event?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, after the Giant Baba Memorial show, that Onita and Kojika, they had agreed to team up after his double knee replacement surgery. And so Onita and Kojika, they're going to team up to take on Masashi Yayagi and Masaya Takahashi. So Onita and Yayagi, they're going to face off against one another again after it seemed like their feud was over once again before Onita's 2017 retirement. But this match officially puts their feud with one another at 30 years, as Onita and Kojika. And this match is going to start with Kojika and Yayagi actually going at it at first, outside the ring, as Onita and Takahashi would face off, with Takahashi charging at Onita, but Onita would move out of the way, and Takahashi would go into the turnbuckle, with Onita and Kojika coming over and working on Takahashi's leg. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Onita would throw Takahashi into a barbed wire board, but then Onita would charge at Takahashi, and he would move out of the way, causing Onita to go into that barbed wire board, followed by Takahashi smashing a chair over the barbed wire board, with Takahashi trying a spinning toe hold on Onita, but Onita would spit red mist in his face and then DDT Takahashi. Onita would then tag in Kojika, as Kojika would act like he was going to pile drive Takahashi, I guess, with Yayagi coming over and just begin laying kicks to Kojika. Takahashi would then grab Onita, with Onita clearly having mist again in his mouth, with Onita spitting that mist in Yagi's face and then hitting him with a chair, as Kojika would end up rolling Yagi up to get the win, with Yagi kicking out at 3 1/4 as he tried to protect himself, I guess, here. And then afterwards, Onita and Yagi, they would begin fighting outside before getting back in the ring and fighting, as Onita and Yagi, they were hugging at Onita's retirement show back in 2017, and that seems like a fond memory at this point, as it just seems like a switch with them between liking each other and hating each other. This was an undercard match, and there was nothing notably bad, so I'll take that as another win, although the Big Japan fan base does not seem to have the same love for Onita that I'm used to seeing him with his own fan base or the Tokyo fans. Then the main event's going to be Sami Kodaka taking on Orka Uto, who is a Big Japan young boy having just moved up to be able to get a new ring name, and he's going to challenge for the Big Japan Deathmatch title here, despite not even really being a deathmatch fan, although he married Raisa Sira, who is more into deathmatches than he is. This is going to be a fluorescent light tubes deathmatch, and it would start with Kodaka throwing Uto into the light tubes in the ropes, and then hit a light tube over his head, and then place one in his shirt, and begin breaking it with kicks before taking the broken light tube out and just running it through his forehead. Kodaka would then try to suplex Uto, but he would end up picking Kodaka up and just slam him on a stack of light tubes, and then take another stack of light tubes and smash them over Kodaka's head. Uto would then throw Kodaka outside the ring and smash a light tube over his head, as Kodaka would try to grab for a chair, but Uto would end up kicking it right away from him, and then they would end up getting back in the ring with Kodaka catching an Uto kick and give him a dragon screw leg whip, followed by Kodaka breaking a light tube over his own head and using that broken light tube to cut open Uto some more. Kodaka would then grab a light tube skyscraper and dive off the top, going right into Uto, as Kodaka would come away from it hobbling. Kodaka would then take that huge stack of light tubes he just broke across Uto and try to hit Uto over the head with it, but Uto would not be about that lifestyle and put his arms up to block it, causing the light tubes to just kind of break without Uto getting that much impact. Kodaka would then try for a Hurricane Rana off the top rope, but Uto would kind of block it and then not, as Kodaka would end up delivering a half-ass Hurricane Rana, as Uto is apparently not about making anything look good in this match after these last two spots. Kodaka would then try for a kick, but Uto would manage to catch him and deliver a powerbomb to him, and then take a huge stack of light tubes. Uto would then grab a device that looks like a fan that would hold 8 light tubes on it, and just smash them all over Kodaka's head. Although Kodaka would get his arms up to block it as well, it would still look pretty impressive, shattering all over him. Kodaka would then come back with a kick and place a giant stack of light tubes over Uto, and kick it, breaking it across Uto, and then bring in a huge ladder and climb up to the top of it and dive off of it, with Uto kind of catching him as Uto would kick out. Kodaka would then look to kick Uto, but Uto would manage to get up and deliver a big boot to him, and then go for a clothesline with Kodaka rolling him up with a schoolboy, and then just straight up punching Uto in the mouth. Kodaka would then smash another light tube over Uto's head, and then kick it, breaking it across him, followed by delivering a brainbuster to him, but Uto would still kick out. Kodaka would then climb up to the top of the ladder, but Uto would climb it up as well, with Kodaka giving Uto the middle finger and then spitting at him before they would begin striking one another, before Kodaka would end up just delivering a headbutt to Uto, knocking him off the ladder, as Kodaka would end up delivering a double knee drop off the top of the ladder and cover Uto to get the win. This was okay, as Kodaka tried, but you could tell this was not something Uto wanted to be a part of. I would tend to think that this was a work, but Kodaka spitting at him, which was not something you see too much in Japanese wrestling, makes me wonder if Kodaka himself was frustrated with Uto's lack of passion in a main event match. Afterwards, Sakuda would end up jumping Kodaka and lay him out, as Sakuda is definitely not someone who lacks passion for deathmatch wrestling, and Sakuda would challenge Kodaka for the following month at the Yokohama Bunka Gym. Uto would end up working death matches for about 2 more months before announcing he was done with them, and then be gone from Big Japan altogether after 7 months, as he seems to be out of the business altogether at this point.
A special benefit show for Yoshihiro Takayama would take place on August 26th at Corrigan Hall, with Atsushi Onita reacquainting with the rival on the show. Who was that rival, and what happened in the match?
Yeah, so Onita's going to team up with Kazusada Higuchi and Ken Oka here. They're part of the DDT family, as Onita's going to be getting closer with the DDT family here going forward, as his relationship with 0-1 came to a sour ending prior to his 2017 retirement. And they're going to take on the team of Nosawa, Minoru Fujita, and Kazuyuki Fujita, which this is going to be the first time that Onita's facing off against Kazuyuki Fujita since his 2017 retirement match, where Fujita began attacking Onita after the match, knowing that Onita was going to come back out of retirement eventually, so let's set something up here. And this is going to be a barbed wire board death match, and it would start with everyone brawling outside the ring, with Onita and Kazuyuki going into the crowd before Nosawa would come over and just throw Onita back in the ring. Onita and Nosawa would do their chair bit, with Onita smashing a chair over his head, but then Kazuyuki would come in and Onita would end up smashing a chair over his head, and he would just no-sell that, and then Nosawa and Minoru Fujita, they would get the table out, but of course Onita would end up smashing Nosawa's head over the table and then bring him on the table and pile drive him through it. Kazuyuki Fujita would then begin putting Onita in a sleeper, with Higuchi coming over to make the save, and then Minoru Fujita, he would end up grabbing Onita as Kazuyuki would charge at him, with Onita spitting red mist in his face and then throwing Nosawa into the barbed wire board. Then Onita would end up taking the broken table piece and just smash it over Minoru Fujita and Nosawa's head, and then hit Nosawa with the Fire Thunder powerbomb, but Minoru would manage to make the save, and then Minoru would end up setting the barbed wire board on a stack of chairs as Kazuyuki would come over and pick Onita up and just drop him through the barbed wire board and cover him, but Onita would manage to kick out. Nosawa would then try for a chair shot to the head, but he would get red mist spit in his face, followed by Onita taking that chair and just begin smashing it over Nosawa's head multiple times, and then Onita would end up hitting a Thunderfire powerbomb on Nosawa, but he would manage to kick out. So Onita would then just smash the chair over Nosawa's head once again, and then hit another Thunderfire powerbomb on Nosawa, with him barely kicking out this time. So then Onita would take the chair and once again just smash it over Nosawa's head, and then hit another Thunderfire powerbomb and cover him and get the win. This was okay. It was better than the other Onita matches that he had been having, as him and Nosawa had their type of match down. Although it was kind of like a cheaper version of the 2017 Onita retirement match. Kazuyuki would have been such a great opponent in the 90s that was willing to be paid to job to Onita, and they could have had a decent singles match, but now that is not the case. Kazuyuki would once again try to start shit with Onita by trying to kick him, and then they would end up going face to face before having to be separated, as Kazuyuki and Minoru would then help Nosawa to the back. As of May 2021, this would sadly be the final time that Onita and Kazuyuki Fujita would face off against one another, as they definitely have great chemistry together, even though the present-day forms of them are not the best workers due to their limitations.
Jun Kasai would promote his annual deathmatch carnival on August 28th at Corrigan Hall, as he would team up with Takeda and have a special tag match. Can you go over how the show did, the top matches, and who were their opponents?
So they would announce a crowd of 1,189 fans for this show, which is a good number. It's way down from last year, though, but that was the biggest Freedom show that they've ever put on at Corrigan Hall for Kasai's 20th anniversary show against Takeda, and they ended up drawing 1,654 fans. So this show drew about 500 fans less, but again, I would still consider it a successful number since there was no title match on the show. The main event is a tag match with Kasai and Takeda taking on two GCW wrestlers, and I think a lot of this show was drawn by the fact that the GCW wrestlers are draws on top of just the Deathmatch Carnival name itself is a draw. So those two combined, like I said, still did an overall good number. The fact that they hit over 1,000 for this show would be considered a success. And on this show, Takashi Sasaki is going to take on Toru Sugiura in a barbed wire board death match. Like I mentioned earlier, we're now at a point where Freedoms has decided to give Sugiura the skyrocket push to the top after jobbing him in the important matches, and now he's going to be built up, so he's going to take on the established Takashi Sasaki here, and this would start with Takashi throwing Sugiura in the first barbed wire board in the corner, and then slam him on the other one, and then begin using the barbed wire to cut open Sugiura before taking the barbed wire board and just begin smashing it over him. Takashi would then throw Sugiura in the corner as he would jump off the top and dive, but Takashi would end up moving out of the way. Takashi would then charge at Sugiura, but be met with a high drop kick as Sugiura would end up picking up a chair and just rush it at Takashi, nailing him over the head with it. Sugiura would then go up to the top with Takashi joining him, but Sugiura would end up headbutting Takashi and suplex him off the top rope. Sugiura would then place a barbed wire board across Takashi in the corner, but leave the barbed wire side in his direction as Sugiura would end up delivering a running flip into the barbed wire side of the board. Sugiura would then look to nail Takashi with an over easy, but Takashi would manage to get away and nail Sugiura with the DDT, and then take the barbed wire board and run it right into Sugiura, followed by setting Sugiura up in the turnbuckle and just throw a chair at his face as he would lay the barbed wire board on a stack of chairs and suplex Sugiura off the top, but only Sugiura's leg would end up hitting the barbed wire board there, as this spot would not go as planned. Takashi would then nail Sugiura with a D-Jice and then set up a stack of light tubes against Sugiura and try for a right leg kick, but Sugiura would move out of the way and then headbutt Takashi and then use a running elbow to break a light tube across him. Sugiura would then just begin giving elbows to Takashi and try for a rolling elbow, but Takashi would end up kicking him and then deliver a German suplex, but Sugiura would land on his feet and just elbow Takashi. Sugiura would then pick up Takashi and nail him with the over easy and cover him, but Takashi would manage to kick out, so Sugiura would end up just headbutting him and give him another over easy, and this time cover him to get the win. This was just okay. It took a while to get going, and the crowd really never got into it until the surprise ending of Sugiura actually beating Takashi. They ended up popping there, as I just don't think they had taken Sugiura seriously up at this point. He's kind of always been a goofy character that never really got any noticeable wins, but that's all about to change, although there really wasn't too much to this match. It was all about Sugiura, though, finally getting the big win here. Then the next match is going to be Unchained taking on the GCW team as Minoru Fujita, Kenji Fukimoto, and Kamui. They're going to face off against Toshiyuki Sakuda, G. Raver, and Eric Ryan in a weapons death match as everyone would start brawling right away, with G. Raver diving off the apron and delivering a dropkick to Fujita that was laying on a chair. And then Ryan and Fukimoto, they would begin going at it, with Ryan slamming Fukimoto on plastic forks before Ryan would pull out a concrete block with metal forks attached to it and try to deliver a tiger driver to him, but Fukimoto would manage to flip him over onto the forks, and the forks would end up getting stuck to his back. G-Raver and Fujita, they would get back in the ring as Fujita would end up tossing him his cane and get another one as they would take turns hitting each other over the head with the canes, with Fujita getting behind G-Raver and hitting him with a Russian leg sweep with both canes. Fukimoto would then come in and place his fish hook in G-Raver's mouth and begin using his fishing pole to move G-Raver around in the ring, with Sakuda having to use the pizza cutter to cut the hook off G-Raver's mouth. Eric Ryan would then come in and bring in a weed whacker to the ring as the fans would begin chanting GCW, but Fujita would end up taking his legs out with the cane and then hold Ryan as Fukimoto would end up taking the weed whacker and use it on Ryan's head. Kamui would then pull out a drill, but Ryan would end up grabbing it from him and begin using it on Kamui's arm, and then Sakuda would come in and bring in L statues that you put in your lawn, but Kamui would end up grabbing him and slam Sakuda onto those elves instead, as there's definitely a theme here of you bring in your weapon, you're getting it used on you here. Kamui would then lay some of the broken elves on Sakuda and go up to the top for a moonsault, but Sakuda would move out of the way and then pull out a hammer and shatter one of the broken elves across Kamui's head. followed by him hitting a 619 on Kamui, and then G-Raver would come off the top with a knee drop and then cover Kamui and get the win. The finish kind of came out of nowhere considering everything they were doing to one another, but this match kept my attention the whole time and was entertaining throughout despite how ridiculous some of the weapons they were using. Then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai and Masashi Takeda taking on Marcus Crane and Jimmy Lloyd in a fluorescent light tubes glass board death match. This would start with Kasai and Takeda dropping themselves on light tubes, followed by Lloyd and Crane flipping onto the light tubes, and then sending Kasai and Takeda into the light tubes on the ropes, with them coming back and drop kicking Crane and Lloyd into the other set of light tubes against the ropes. They would begin all brawling around ringside as Takeda would end up taking a light tube and just smashing it over Crane's head, but Crane would get back in the ring and just smash a light tube over Kasai's head. Crane and Lloyd would then take turns working over Kasai until Crane would try to throw Kasai into the ropes, with Kasai reversing it and sending Crane to the ropes, with Takeda catching him and pulling out a blade and just begin cutting Crane with it, and then Takeda would end up coming in and take a gadget and just begin sticking it in Crane's arm before placing a light tube in Crane's mouth and breaking it across his mouth. Kasai would then come in and place a light tube in Crane's pants and slam him without the light tube actually breaking, so Kasai would end up putting it back in Crane's pants and just right elbow it, breaking it across Crane's back. Takeda would then place a light tube against Crane's arm and place a chair over him and smash it with another chair, breaking that light tube across Crane's arm. Kasai and Takeda would then try to send Crane into the corner glass board, but he would stop himself just short, and then Jimmy Lloyd would come over as Takeda and Kasai would try to suplex him through the glass board instead, when Crane would come over and just grab Jimmy and send him into both Kasai and Takeda, causing Takeda to go into the glass board, although Kasai would sell it as well in this creative spot. Lloyd would then place a light tube over Kasai and powerbomb Takeda onto it in another creative spot, and then Jimmy would end up taking a light tube and swing it at Kasai, but he would duck it, and Takeda would come over and drop kick it, breaking it, sending Jimmy out of the ring as Crane would look to hit Kasai with a light tube. But Kasai would block it and then headbutt the light tube, breaking it over Crane. Takeda would then take the other glass board to the outside of the ring and place it over Jimmy's body on a stack of chairs and go up to the top, as Takeda would end up diving off the top, going through the glass board over Jimmy's body to a loud Takeda chant. Kasai would then bring in a razor cross board and set it on a stack of chairs, but Crane would end up grabbing Kasai and slam him on the board, and Jimmy would end up coming in and pick up Takeda and hit him with the Fire Thunder and then bring in a syringe, but Takeda would end up grabbing it from him and just shove it in his mouth and then deliver a German suplex to Jimmy. Crane would then come in and rush at Takeda with light tubes, but Takeda would end up grabbing him and deliver a dragon suplex, breaking the light tubes against the back of Crane's head, followed by Kasai picking him up and hitting a one-winged angel on a stack of light tubes and cover him, but Crane would manage to kick out. And then Kasai would then place a piece of the Razor Cross board on him and go up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash and cover him, but Jimmy would make the save. Kasai would then break a huge stack of light tubes and just begin carving his chest with the broken light tube, and then give Crane the kiss of death and hit him with this really bad-looking pile driver, followed by hitting him with a reverse tiger driver on the Razor Cross board and cover him to get the win. This was a fun, chaotic mess, as this is what the GCW guys are known for in Japan, and that's what drew this show with no title match, and the crowd loved every second of it. Crane would then cut a promo about how much he loves Kasai and go over and kiss him, and then kiss Takeda, as all four would raise each other's hands, as the crowd was super into all of this.
Big Japan would return to the Yokohama Bunka Gym on September 15th with Asami Kodaka defending the Big Japan Deathmatch title against Toshiyuki Sakura in a scaffold deathmatch. Can you talk about what happened for everybody?
Yeah, so as well as being a scaffold match, this is also going to be a fluorescent light tubes knives board death match, and they would start off on the scaffold with both having light tubes in their hands, with Sakura grabbing Kodaka's light tube and smash them both over Kodaka's head, as Sakura would end up knocking Kodaka off the scaffold and then dive onto him, and then he would throw Kodaka into the light tubes on both sides of the ring before breaking a light tube and just begin using it to cut open Kodaka. Sakura would then take the knives board in the ring and try to slam Kodaka, but Kodaka would be the one to manage to slam Sakura on the knives board instead, as the sound would be like he would slam him on the mat, as the crowd would not react at all. Kodaka would then break a light tube over Sakura's head and begin cutting him open with it, and then Kodaka would take Sakura and just pick him up and bang his head up against the scaffold, and then kick him, followed by throwing Sakura in the corner and charging at him, but Sakura would move out of the way. Sakura would then pull out the sticks and stick them in Kodaka's mouth, and then throw him in between the ropes ropes and hit him with the 619 with the stick still in his mouth, and then Sakuda would end up setting up a table, but Kadaka would end up throwing him into it and then place him on the table set up against the ropes as Kadaka would climb up and dive off the scaffold with the double knee drop on Sakuda with the table, failing to break in a painful looking spot. Kadaka would then set up Sakuda into the ropes, but Sakuda would end up grabbing Kadaka and nail him with a sliced bread number 2, and then place a barbed wire board over Kadaka as he would go up to the top of the scaffold and dive off of it on the barbed wire board and cover Kadaka, but Kadaka would manage to kick out. Sakuda would then place a stack of light tubes on Kadaka and go up to the top and go for a 450 splash, but Kadaka would manage to hold up the light tubes up in the air as Sakuda would come crashing down and go through them. Kadaka would then nail Sakuda with the super kick, but as Kadaka would charge at him, Sakuda would end up grabbing him and hit him with the Sakaachi and cover him with Kadaka kicking out at 2. Sakuda would then place a whole bunch of light tubes on the mat and go for another Sakaachi, but Kadaka would block it, and they would both end up deciding to take this to the scaffold. They would end up fighting a little bit until Kadaka would end up grabbing Sakuda and hit him with the brainbuster off the scaffold onto a stack of light tubes in an awesome spot that would finally get a reaction out of the crowd as they've been pretty much dead silent for the entire match. Kadaka would then grab a barbed wire board and kick it up against Sakuda and then hit him with an exploder, just throwing Sakuda into the light tubes and cover him and get the win. So the building was pretty empty for this, as Freedoms didn't even trust Sakuda to main event Corrigan Hall earlier this year, and now Big Japan is main eventing the Yokohama Bunga Gym with him, as they drew one of the smaller numbers that they've ever drawn in this building. Pretty empty for this, as Freedoms didn't even trust Sakuda to main event Corrigan Hall earlier this year, and now Big Japan is main eventing the Yokohama Bunga Gym with him, as they drew one of the smaller numbers that they've ever drawn in this building, and Yokohama is usually a tough crowd to begin with, So when you have much fewer people in this building, you have the problem that this match had, where they're pretty much killing each other here to silence. Although the match itself wasn't great regardless, as there was no real flow to it, it did pick up there at the end with the big brainbuster off the scaffold spot to get a reaction from the crowd. But it was just a little too late into this match to make up for 15 minutes of silence prior to it. Sadly, this would hurt Sakuda in Big Japan's eyes, as he would not be put in a position like this again and ultimately leave the promotion due to feeling like he was never going to advance in Big Japan and have better opportunities elsewhere. Yuko Miyamoto would then come to the ring afterwards and challenge Kadaka for a Big Japan Deathmatch title at the upcoming Sumo Hall show in November to end this show.
Freedoms would hold their 10th year anniversary show on October 1st at Corrigan Hall. Can you go over the top matches and how the show did?
So they would not score 808 fans for this show, which I would consider a little bit of a disappointment considering this is the 10th year anniversary. It did do about 100 fans more than last year's 9th anniversary show, but, that's just these Corrigan Hall shows that are not the Deathmatch Carnival in August or the Christmas Deathmatch show. They just don't draw as well. The fans pick and choose what they want to go to, and usually it's not this show. And like I said, Sugiura, he's going to be the focus of this promotion going forward, and he's not really considered a draw at this point. He just had that disappointing crowd against Kasai in a non-title match. Same match here now with the title for the 10th year anniversary, and it does about 100 fans more. So, but that's what the point of this whole pushing Sugiura to see if he can be a legitimate draw, and it's just going to take some time. But having the matches that he's been having, they're looking to him to be a future draw and for these shows to start going up because he's in the main event. And on this show, it's going to be Unchained versus Los Namadas in a single elimination match. It's going to be Masashi Takeda, Kenji Fukimoto, Minoru Fujita, and Kamui taking on Mama Sasaki, Violento Jack, Mito Extremo, and Sikape. And this would start off with all of them brawling around ringside before Kamui and Mito, they would get in the ring, with Kamui climbing the ropes and hitting Mito with a Hurricane Rana, and him getting out of the ring as Kamui would end up hitting a moonsault off the middle turnbuckle onto everyone on the outside, which would be followed by Jack hitting a somersault senton onto everyone on the outside. Fukimoto and Jack, they would get in the ring, with Fukimoto stabbing a gadget into Jack's arm, with him allowing Jack to do it to him, but Jack would end up just shoving the gadget into Fukimoto's forehead instead, as Fukimoto would get out of the ring, and Kamui would get in the ring, and Jack would end up hitting a German suplex to him, followed by pulling out a bucket of thumbtacks and dump them over his head like Masaaka onto Kamui, with Jack then picking Kamui up and just dropping him on the thumbtacks. Fujita and Takeda would then hit the ring, with Fujita tossing Jack over the top rope on the apron, and Takeda would end up drop-kicking Jack to the floor to eliminate him. Sikape would then come in and smash a box against Fujita's head, and then open the box to reveal that it was Legos inside, as Sikape would then try to senton Fujita's head onto the Legos, with Fujita moving out of the way, and Sikape would then go into them. Mammoth and Mito would then hit the ring and hold Fujita, as Sikape would then come off the top with a diving foot stomp and cover and eliminate Fujita. Then Takeda would come in and double suplex Mito and Sikape, and then bring in a stick with a water jug attached to it and swing it at Mito and miss, with Mito taking it from him and hitting him in the back. Mito would then take another swing, and Takeda would move out of the way and spear Mito, followed by hitting a spider German suplex off the turnbuckle on Mito, but then Sikape would come over and smash the water jug stick, knocking Takeda to the apron, and then follow that up with hitting a dropkick, knocking Takeda to the floor to eliminate him. Kamui would then come in and go up to the top, but Mammoth would come over and look to chokeslam Kamui off the top rope to the outside, but Kamui would manage to spit blue mist in Mammoth's face and then deliver a Hurricane Rana to him, sending him over the top rope, as both would end up falling to the floor for the double elimination. This would leave Fukimoto to go up against both Mito and Sikape, as Fukimoto would end up knocking Sikape over the top rope off the apron, but Mammoth would be right there to catch Sikape and just put him right back on the apron. Sikape would then grab a hold of Fukimoto, as Mito would go up to the top, but Fukimoto would get behind Sikape and just throw him at the turnbuckle, and then roll Sikape up and backslide him to pin him to eliminate Sikape. This would leave it to just be Mito and Fukimoto, as Mito would end up pulling out a board with pizza cutters on it and slam Fukimoto onto it, and then put the board over him and go up to the top for a swanton bomb, but Fukimoto would manage to turn the board around, with Mito end up landing on the pizza cutters instead. Fukimoto would then end up hitting Mito with a package pile driver with gadgets on the top of the box, had Legos on it, and cover Mito and get the win. This was okay, a lot of mindless brawling, some of it was fun, some of it was just kind of basic deathmatch stuff, but overall, like I said, just an okay match. Then the main event's going to be Jun Kasai defending the King of Freedom World Championship against Toru Sugiura in a fluorescent light tubes glass board death match. This match would start with both Kasai and Sugiura taking light tubes and smashing them over one another's heads repeatedly, until Kasai would end up getting the upper hand and just begin breaking multiple light tubes over Sugiura's head, and then throwing him on the other side of the ropes against more light tubes. Kasai would then break another light tube over Sugiura's head, but Sugiura would get up and just begin striking and chopping Kasai, but Kasai would just throw him into the light tubes against the ropes again. Kasai would then throw Sugiura in the corner, but he would end up jumping up to the top and dive off it onto Kasai. Sugiura would then grab the first glass board and set up against the turnbuckle and headbutt Kasai, but when he would go to charge at him, Kasai would end up grabbing Sugiura and German suplex him into the glass board. Kasai would then take some of the glass and just begin cutting Sugiura's forehead with it, and then grab a light tube and throw Sugiura into the ropes, as he would end up coming back with a flying elbow, breaking that light tube across Kasai. Sugiura would then lay Kasai in the corner and place the other glass board and a chair over Kasai, and then hit a running dive, sending himself into the glass board with it exploding all over Kasai in an awesome looking spot, as Kasai would escape to the outside and Sugiura would just end up hitting a tope con hilo onto him. Sugiura would then bring Kasai back on the apron, and then bring him back in the ring by suplexing him over the ropes and cover him, with Kasai kicking out by giving two double middle fingers. Sugiura would then look for a powerbomb on a stack of light tubes, but Kasai would end up lifting Sugiura up and hit a reverse fire thunder, sending Sugiura's head into the light tubes. Kasai would then bring in a knife and place it between Sugiura's mouth before hitting him with a reverse tiger driver and cover him, with Sugiura kicking out. Kasai would then take some light tubes and begin breaking them and just begin carving his chest with them to allow Kasai chant, as Kasai would go up to the top for a Pearl Harbor splash, but Sugiura would manage to get up and take that knife and try the Masaaka spot, sticking it in Kasai's head, with again the knife just falling right off, as Sugiura would then end up just headbutting Kasai and then hit him with the Spanish fly while screaming Masaaka's name. Sugiura would then take a chair with light tubes on it and place it right next to Kasai and go for a running elbow, but Kasai would end up just taking the chair and just tossing it at Sugiura's head, breaking the light tubes, and then follow that up by taking more light tubes and charging with them at Sugiura's back, with the light tubes failing to break before he would end up just breaking them over Sugiura's head, and then pick Sugiura up and hit a one-winged angel and cover him, but Sugiura would manage to kick out, as Kasai would just give this huge smile to that. Kasai would then pull out a ladder with a board of knives attached to it, although the board would end up coming off right away, so Kasai would end up just placing that board of knives over Sugiura's body and go up to the top of the ladder and dive off of it for a Pearl Harbor splash, clash, with Sugiura turning the board over right at the last second, and Kasai would end up going into the knives instead. Fans now are beginning to chant for Sugiura. Kasai would then go over to Takeda, who was at ringside watching the match, and grab Takeda's hand to pull himself up, as Kasai would end up headbutting Sugiura and then nail him with a German suplex and cover him, but Sugiura would kick out right away and then deliver a rolling elbow to Kasai, with Kasai just giving him the middle finger, and then Sugiura would end up nailing Kasai with the over easy and cover him, but Kasai would kick out, so Sugiura would then take another stack of light tubes and place them up against Kasai, and then hit a running elbow, breaking those light tubes across Kasai's body and cover him to get the win, as Sugiura is now the King of Freedom World Champion. This match took a little while to find its identity, but it really picked up towards the end, putting it in the really good range because of how great the last 5 minutes or so was. Kasai was great here, and Sugiura really did start to win the people over, as Freedoms is now going to give Sugiura the ball here to run with it, as they want to make Sugiura the new top guy, their new generation top face. Kind of like how WWF went in the new generation type movement and made Bret Hart their guy after WrestleMania 10. Sugiura is now the champ, although I wouldn't say he is made yet, as he's going to have to continue to earn the right to be known as the guy in a promotion that has Jun Kasai in it, as Kasai, who made himself the guy due to having all these type of matches like this and better over the last 10 years. This would end up being the right call, though, to give Sugiura the ball, as he's going to continue to grow as the champion going forward.
Atsushi Onita would return to Big Japan on October 25th in Shinkiba for a special anniversary show for someone he had worked with years ago. Can you go over who that was and their match?
Yeah, so Onita's going to team up with Great Kachika and Yuichi Taniguchi here, as Taniguchi was a huge Onita fan during the FMW days, as he got into the wrestling business because of his love for Onita, although the timing of him getting in the business was right around the same time that Onita was going to retire in '95, so Taniguchi would join the Big Japan dojo, although he would end up working a lot for the Onita Pro promotion from 1999 to 2001 quite regularly, and this is going to be Taniguchi's 25th anniversary show. And they're going to take on the team of Masaya Takahashi, Toshiyuki Sakuda, and Freddy Krueger, which Freddy was hanging out with Onita back in February, so I guess I missed where they broke up. This match is going to start, of course, with everyone brawling all around the building, as Onita and Takahashi, they would end up fighting in the crowd, with Onita pile-driving him on the entrance ramp, and then they would end up fighting on the other side of the building, with Takahashi smashing Onita's head against the merchandise table. Taniguchi, who has been broken down for years, but has a job for life with Big Japan because he was a part of the first dojo class, would come in and face off against Sakuda and throw Sakuda in the corner and elbow him before tagging in Onita, who would come in with a chair, but Sakuda would end up grabbing the chair from Onita and try to smash it over his head, but Onita would end up spitting red mist in Sakuda's face and then smash the chair over his head and then hit Sakuda with the DDT. Onita and Kachika would then crotch Sakuda against the turnbuckle in the corner, as Taniguchi would place a chair against him and hit a running kick into that chair. Kachika and Freddy would then square off, with Freddy trying to use his claw hold on Kachika, with Kachika getting out of the ring. Taniguchi would then come in, but Takahashi would end up taking him outside the ring and begin using a saw to cut open Taniguchi and then throw him back in the ring and then begin using a barbed wire bat on his cut before Sakuda would use the saw some more, followed by Freddy using his claws on Taniguchi's forehead. Taniguchi would eventually fight back and hit a Northern Lights suplex on Freddy, with Takahashi coming in and trying to hit a brain buster on him, when Onita would come over and spit red mist in Takahashi's face. Onita and Kachika would then send Sakuda into the ropes and deliver double elbows, followed by Onita sending Freddy into Taniguchi, as he would hit him with the barbed wire bat and then just begin repeatedly hitting Freddy with the bat until just rolling him up with a schoolboy to get the win. The story was good, but the match wasn't. But considering Onita is probably the most mobile guy on his team, this is something you're going to assume would be the case for a match like this. Again, the story of Taniguchi getting just beaten up and bloodied made for a good anniversary story for him, even though so much of the match dragged, as most of it was just Taniguchi getting cut up by the heels before Onita would save the day and Taniguchi would end up getting the roll-up win. Onita, Kachika, and Taniguchi would all pose together and chant 1, 2, 3 fire, with Onita pouring water over Taniguchi and posing with him to end the show.
Big Japan would run their big Sumo Hall show on November 4th, with Jun Kasai returning to the promotion. Can you go over his match as well as the main event for everyone?
So this is the annual Big Japan Sumo Hall show, and like I mentioned last episode, part of the deal in their talent relationship is to get to bring in Jun Kasai once a year, as he and Takashi Sasaki will both end up taking part in a match together, as it's going to be Ryuji Ito and Takashi Sasaki taking on Jun Kasai and Toshiyuki Sakuda, and Sakuda, he's going to fill in for Jackie Numazawa, who's been out pretty much for the year to recover from all the injuries he's suffered from. This is going to be a knives and saws board concrete block death match. And this would start with all of them brawling to the outside right away, with Kasai setting Takashi up on a table near the entranceway of the building, as Sakuda would go through the crowd and climb up to the second level of the entrance and dive off of it with a flip and completely miss the table and land on his ass. That would be the table spot of the match, as Takashi would get up and everyone would head to the ring, with Kasai and Sakuda trying to throw Ito into the saw board in the corner, with him stopping himself just short, and then they would end up doing it again into the knives and razor cross board, with Ito stopping himself just short again, so Kasai would end up just throwing Sakuda into Ito, causing him to go into that knives board. Kasai would then take a knife and then begin just using it on Ito's forehead and then his mouth. Kasai would then tag Sakuda in, who would bring in these kitchen knives attached to a concrete block and take one of the knives and just begin cutting Ito with it, and then Sakuda would take the saws board and lay it over Ito's body and grab a chair and just throw it at the saws board, making it go right into Ito. Kasai would then come in with his potted plant containers and just begin breaking them with the chair and try to hit a reverse tiger driver on Ito, but Ito would manage to lift Kasai up and drop him onto the broken containers instead. Takashi would get tagged in and lay Kasai's head on a chair and place a chair over it, as he would end up just smashing it with another chair, and then Takashi would begin setting up concrete blocks and dump Kenzans on them and look to powerbomb Kasai, but Kasai would manage to escape and pile drive Takashi headfirst onto them instead. Sakuda would then take a Kenzan and just begin jamming it into Takashi's head and hit him with a bad looking swinging DDT. And then Sakuda would end up laying the knives board on Takashi and go up to the top and dive off of it right onto Takashi and then cover him, but Ito would make the save. Sakuda would then take the saws board and lay it over Takashi and go up to the top again, but Takashi would this time get up and just throw the saws board at Sakuda and then set up multiple chairs against one another and place the concrete blocks and Kenzans on top of them, and then superplex Sakuda, but Takashi would end up landing on the concrete blocks instead, as Sakuda would end up just flying right past them in a spot I don't think was intended for. They would end up tagging out, and Kasai and Ito would grab parts of the razor cross boards and just begin smashing it over one another's head, with Kasai grabbing Ito and DDTing him into the razor cross board. Kasai would then tag Sakuda back in, who would give a 619 to Ito, and then pull out some sharp sticks, but that would get Ito to pull out his syringes, with Sakuda grabbing them from him and using it on Ito, followed by Kasai holding Takashi, as Sakuda would end up putting the other syringe in Takashi's mouth. Sakuda and Kasai would then take the sticks, but Ito and Takashi would grab those from them, and then they would end up placing them through the sides of their mouths, as now everybody has something stuck through their gums. They would all begin exchanging strikes with one another, as Sakuda would end up hitting Ito with his Sakaachi, as Kasai would end up hitting his reverse tiger driver on Takashi. They would then end up pulling the sticks out of their mouths, as Kasai would end up going to the top rope and hit a Pearl Harbor splash on Ito, followed by a Swanton bomb from Sakuda on Ito, with Takashi making the save. Sakuda would then go for another Swanton bomb, but Ito would move out of the way this time, as Ito and Takashi would end up taking the syringes out of their mouths and just begin stabbing Sakuda in the head with them. Kasai would then go for some skewers into Takashi's head, but Takashi would end up grabbing them from him and stick them in Kasai's head, followed by Takashi hitting a D-Geist on Sakuda, as Ito would end up going up to the top and hit a Dragon Splash on him to get the win. This was kind of an entertaining train wreck, as there was definitely some screw-ups here, but they actually made the match more entertaining, as this was pretty much just a standard non-main event death match. Afterwards, Sakuda would end up giving the double middle fingers to everyone and leave the ring, and Kasai and Ito, who had came up together in Big Japan 20 years ago, would end up shaking hands as their feud is over, as Kasai would end up leaving the ring, but not before giving the double middle fingers to Abdullah Kobayashi and Big Japan president Eiji Tosaka, who were doing commentary for the show. Then the main event's going to be Asami Kadaka defending the Big Japan Deathmatch title against Yuko Miyamoto in a spike nails board, barbed wire board, Kinzon board, and gadget board deathmatch. And this is a rematch of their May 5th, 2014 Yokohama Bunka Gym show that they both main evented together, which had Miyamoto as the champion, and he would walk away after defeating Kadaka, still the champ. Well, now Kadaka is the champion going into this show, and he's going to try and get back at his tag partner 5 years later. This match would start off with Kadaka slamming Miyamoto on the barbed wire board, and then wrapping the barbed wire around Miyamoto's head, causing him to bleed before shoving his face into the spike nails. Kadaka would look to send Miyamoto running into the spike nails, but Miyamoto would reverse it and send Kadaka flying into the gadget board instead, as he would then use the spike nails to cut open Kadaka. Miyamoto would then slam the Kinzon board down and slam Kadaka on it, with one of the Kinzons getting stuck on his ass, so Miyamoto would just begin punching that Kinzon, and then Miyamoto would begin to use the barbed wire and begin wrapping it around Kadaka, and then flip him in the air using that barbed wire. Kadaka would then grab Miyamoto and send him into the ropes, with Miyamoto trying for his handspring elbow, but Kadaka would turn that into a suplex in a really cool spot. Kadaka would then take Miyamoto up to the turnbuckle and Hurricane Rana him onto a stack of chairs, with Miyamoto screaming in pain as his arm would get caught in a chair. Kadaka would then take the Kinzons and place them on a barbed wire board and try to suplex Miyamoto on the board, but Miyamoto would counter and drop Kadaka onto it instead. Miyamoto would then bring in a ladder and place it over his head, but Kadaka would be ready for it and grab a chair and just begin hitting the ladder with the chair, followed by smashing it over Miyamoto's back and then laying him out with the super kick. Kadaka would then set up the ladder and go up to the top, but Miyamoto would climb up the ladder as well and superplex Kadaka off the top of the ladder, with Miyamoto selling the pain as well, as he would pin Kadaka, but Kadaka would kick out. Miyamoto would then place a Kinzon in Kadaka's head, with it getting stuck on him, as Miyamoto would place the Kinzon board over Kadaka and go up to the top of the ladder, but Kadaka would get up and climb the ladder as well and kick Miyamoto off the ladder, sending him through the Kinzon board, as Kadaka would then dive off the ladder onto Miyamoto. Kadaka would then charge at Miyamoto, but he would grab Kadaka and nail him with the Fire Thunder, as the Kinzon is still stuck in Kadaka's head, and he would be in a lot of pain after hitting his head against the mat, as the referee would help pull the Kinzon out. Miyamoto would then set the spike nails and hit a Fire Thunder, just tossing Kadaka on the board and cover him, but Kadaka would kick out. Miyamoto would then climb to the top of the ladder again and hit a moonsault off of it and cover Kadaka, but Kadaka would kick out, which would get a pop from the crowd that has been pretty quiet throughout this match. They would begin striking one another, with Miyamoto getting the better end of it and try for a Fire Thunder, but Kadaka would turn that into a Brainbuster and then deliver an exploder, sending Miyamoto onto the spike nails, followed by nailing him with a super kick and cover him, but Miyamoto would kick out. Kadaka would then charge at Miyamoto again, as Miyamoto would end up picking Kadaka up and try for another Fire Thunder, but Kadaka would escape it and roll Miyamoto up for a 2 count, and then Miyamoto would come right back and nail Kadaka with a double running knee and cover Kadaka, but Kadaka would kick out at 2. Miyamoto would then go up to the top and try for a moonsault, with Kadaka getting his knees up and then trying for a kick, but Miyamoto would roll him up and then cover him with a La Magistral, with Kadaka kicking out, and then he would just nail Miyamoto with a knee. Kadaka would then end up hitting an exploder, sending Miyamoto onto the barbed wire board and cover him, but again Miyamoto would kick out, so Kadaka would then go up to the top of the ladder and deliver a diving double knee and finally get the pinfall win over Miyamoto, putting him away, and defend the Big Japan Deathmatch title here. They went all out here and did a lot of stuff. The crowd was still pretty tough here though, as this is such a big building and there was only about 1/4 of the fans filling this building up. This was good though, as this was kind of their big moment main eventing Big Japan's WrestleMania, although I'm sure they would both tell you they've had a bunch of better matches in their careers despite this being their biggest. Abdullah Kobayashi afterwards would leave the announce desk and come to the ring and challenge Kadaka for the upcoming Yokohama Bunka Gym show in the following month, with Kadaka accepting, as Kadaka and Miyamoto would get up on the turnbuckles and raise their hands to chant with the crowd. This would also end up being the final time that Big Japan would run at Sumo Hall, as I would imagine at this point the financial hit that they were taking was not worth it, and they would end up having their next big show at the Osaka Prefectural Gym in 2020, which holds about 6,000 fans instead of 12,000, and they would end up getting a big sponsor for that show as well.
A new promotion based around Atsushi Onita would hold its debut show on November 17th in Yokohama. Can you go over what this promotion was and what took place in Onita's match?
So the DDT promotion, which has pretty much been getting bigger and bigger every year as they've been growing steadily over the last 20 years, they have created several sub-promotions over these years, and Senzihiro Takagi, the owner, would reach out to Onita about starting a new one. It would be pretty much what 0-1 did with the Super Fireworks being a sub-promotion, having Onita as the top guy and them having exploding death matches. As Onita and 0-1, they had been on the out since right before Onita's 2017 retirement, so Onita would end up accepting Takagi's offer, and together they would create this sub-promotion, Blast and Koshin, which Koshin means tournament, so on this show they would have pretty much 2 play-in tournament matches earlier in the show to be able to participate in the main event, although they would end up taking the losers of the earlier matches and put them in the match anyway, as it's going to be Atsushi Onita, Kenichiro Arai, Asuka, and Yumihito Aminari taking on Senzihiro Takagi, Shinya Aoki, Fuma, and Yukio Naya in an exploding barbed wire bat death match. And this match, it's going to start with everyone brawling outside the ring, with Onita taking Naya into the crowd and hitting him with a water bottle, as Arai, he would end up throwing Takagi in a row of seats. Onita, he would then end up taking a chair and just swing it at Takagi, with Takagi taking one and swinging it right back at Onita. They would end up getting back in the ring with Takagi going for a chair shot, but Onita would end up kicking the chair away from him and just smash it over his head, but Takagi would end up taking the chair from Onita and smash it over his head. As you don't see Onita take too many chair shots to the head anymore, Onita would be pressed up against the table in the corner as Takagi would turn on the exploding barbed wire bat, but Imanari, he would rush over to cover Onita, and Takagi would end up nailing Imanari with the exploding barbed wire bat instead. Takagi and Fuma then would look to set up Onita on a table when Arai and Asuka, they would come over, and the next thing you know, Onita would have Fuma on the table and pile drive him through the table instead and cover him, but the referee would be too focused on getting the table out of the ring and would just pretty much ignore Onita covering Fuma, causing Onita to scream at the referee, "Come on, ref," when Aoki would come over and just begin choking Onita, with Arai and Asuka trying to make the save, but Takagi would dump them out of the ring. Naya and Aoki would then place Onita on a chair as Takagi would turn on the exploding barbed wire bat and give it to Aoki, but Onita would get out of the chair, so Naya would end up grabbing a hold of him, and Aoki would end up nailing Onita with the exploding barbed wire bat standing up, as Onita would end up getting out of the ring right away. Arai would then get back in the ring with Aoki coming in and putting him in a cross arm breaker, as Onita would get back in the ring and spit red mist in Aoki's face, as Asuka and Arai would grab a hold of him, with Onita turning on the exploding barbed wire bat again and nailing Aoki with it. Naya would then come back in and turn on the exploding barbed wire bat again, but Onita would spit red mist in his face, as Arai and Imanari would then suplex him, followed by Asuka hitting an Asai moonsault and covering him, with Naya kicking out. Onita would then take the broken table piece and begin smashing it over Naya's head, as Asuka and Arai would hold on to Naya, and Onita would end up hitting him with another exploding barbed wire bat shot and cover him, this time to get the win. This match had a good flow to it, even though it was the standard exploding match that you see all the time, but Onita's knees at this point are probably the best they've been in years, as now it's been 9 months since he had gotten the 2 knee replacement surgeries, and he's moving around a lot better, and this wasn't an embarrassment like some of the other matches that he had since he came back out of retirement last year.
Shadow WX would return to create his own promotion called MLW. Can you talk about how this promotion was also formed and the 2 show matches he had on December 13th in Shinkiba and December 15th in Osaka?
So Shadow WX is someone that has not been seen by the wrestling public since 2013 after he had been diagnosed with Bastos disease, which causes hyperthyroidism, which resulted in him being diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and he's also been dealing with blockage of the brain, resulting in a lack of blood and oxygen making it to the brain, while also dealing with getting surgery for ligament damage. So he's been in bad shape, and Big Japan paid him up until January 2015, and he's been pretty much on his own since then. Well, he is now at a point where he feels like he can get back into the wrestling business on a part-time schedule, but he is done with Big Japan and he wants to start up his own promotion, which he's going to do, and he's going to call it Major Leaguers Wrestling, so MLW. And he's gotten 2 shows booked, one in Shikiba and one in Osaka. Then Shadow would state that he would like the Winger to wrestle for his promotion, and I went over in a past episode that the Winger just kind of vanished from the wrestling business after his 25th anniversary show in 2016, and Takashi Sasaki, the owner of Freedoms, just stopped hearing from him. Well, Shadow had a working relationship with the Winger going back 20 years, and he felt like he had the best shot of getting the Winger to come back. But he also would be unable to bring the Winger back, so he would end up reaching out to Necro Butcher, who would accept coming back to Japan, even though he had been dealing with health problems of his own, as he had not yet been diagnosed, but he was dealing with a lymphoma cancer that would end up being later diagnosed with, although he recently stated that he is now cancer-free. Necro is much different looking from the last time I talked about him in the 2011 episode where he faced off against Masato Tanaka. It is very apparent he had a tough life since that time period. This is going to be a barbed wire board lemon death match, as Shadow WX wants nothing to do with light tubes here and wants to kind of have an old school Big Japan weapons death match. The first show would take place in Shikiba, and this would start with both of them sitting down in chairs like they were going to punch each other, but instead Necro would end up going for Shadow's face and then just throw him out of the ring and pull out a knife and just begin cutting Shadow's forehead with it. Necro would then take Shadow in the stands and just continue to stab him with the knife, as Shadow would finally fight back, and after about 10 minutes in, Necro would end up taking his first bump of getting slammed outside the ring. Shadow would then set up a barbed wire board outside the ring and try to powerbomb Necro, but Necro would just try to flip him over, but he didn't have the strength to do that, so Shadow would end up just falling off the apron into the barbed wire board. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Necro would try to slam Shadow, but would fail at doing that, so then Shadow would end up just dropping Necro, who is barefoot, on the barbed wire board, followed by Shadow squeezing the juices out of the lemons onto Necro's feet, and then Shadow would end up setting the other barbed wire board outside and suplex Necro off the turnbuckle through the barbed wire board, as this would get the first pop from the crowd 20 minutes into this match. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Shadow would end up hitting a lariat on Necro and then cover him, but Necro would end up getting his shoulder up. But then Shadow would end up hitting a brainbuster on Necro and cover him to get the win. There was so much stalling to get this match to 20 minutes when they didn't have 20 minutes in them. The suplex off the turnbuckle through the barbed wire board was the only highlight of the match, as they should not have tried to go as long as they did, but they probably felt like the show was built around them, and they had to. Shadow would end up announcing afterwards that the next set of shows in May, he would debut a LED light death match, which is going to go up against the Big Japan fluorescent light tubes death match, although the pandemic would end up hitting and these shows would never end up happening. Shadow would then get on the mic and announce that Yoshihito Sasaki was in the crowd, and they would shake hands, as Yoshihito was in the same boat as Shadow, where he suffered a knee injury, and then the doctors botched the knee surgery, ending his wrestling career, and Big Japan paid for him for about 1 year before letting him go in January 2015 as well. This would be the last image of Yoshihito Sasaki at a wrestling show. So after that Shinkiba performance, they're going to wrestle again in Osaka 2 days later. This is the same building that Freedoms has ran the last 2 years in July. It's a nice, big, spacious building, and there are not that many fans for this show, so it does not look well attended here. This is going to be a no-ropes barbed wire death match, and this match will start with Necro jumping Shadow right away and taking him to the outside and begin using the barbed wire to cut Shadow up. They would end up getting back in the ring and sit down in chairs, and this time begin punching each other in the face, with Shadow then headbutting Necro, and he would end up falling down from all the punishment due to the headbutt. They would then take their chairs and do a dueling chair spot with one another, with Shadow smashing his chair over Necro's head, and then Shadow would begin ripping off the barbed wire and wrap it around his arm and hit Necro with a barbed wire lariat and then cover him, but Necro would manage to kick out. Shadow would then take the barbed wire and put Necro in a crossface and press the barbed wire against him, with Necro giving up to give Shadow the win once again. This match went almost 9 minutes, which is probably more accurate of the amount of time they should get, but they still did a bunch of stalling and did even less here, as at least the Shinkiba one had that one suplex spot off the turnbuckle. Here, they didn't really do too much, although Necro seemed pretty beat up from messing with the barbed wire. But yeah, this was a different type of bad for this match, and the crowd was so quiet the entire time. This would be the final MLW show, as like I said, Shadow planned on doing some more in May 2020, but because of the pandemic, he postponed them, and now here we are in May 2021, and there still is no announcement of another show happening, although he might just be waiting for the pandemic to end, but that might take a while. Shadow has still not wrestled either since this match, and that concludes this interesting story of the short-lived MLW promotion.
Big Japan would return to the Yokohama Bunka Gym on December 18th, with Asami Karaka defending his Big Japan Deathmatch title against Abdullah Kobayashi. Can you go over this match for everyone?
Yeah, so this is going to be an Iron Cage Fluorescent Light Tubes death match, and this match would start with both of them grabbing light tubes, but Kobayashi would end up grabbing Kodaka's light tube from him and break both light tubes over Kodaka's head. Kobayashi would then try to headbutt a light tube over Kodaka, but he would move out of the way and Kobayashi would end up breaking it over his face. Kodaka would then send Kobayashi slowly into the ropes with light tubes attached to it, followed by Kodaka using a broken light tube to cut open Kobayashi. Kodaka would then try to send Kobayashi into the Iron Cage, but Kobayashi would get away and break a light tube and then just cut Kodaka in the forehead with it, and then try to send Kodaka into the cage, but he would reverse it, and Kobayashi would stop himself just short of the cage. Kobayashi would then try to send Kodaka into it, but he would stop himself just short, so Kobayashi would charge at him, but they would both end up going into the Iron Cage, breaking numerous light tubes in the process. Kodaka would then get out of the cage and hit a running kick, and then set up light tubes against Kobayashi and kick them, breaking them across Kobayashi's chest. Kodaka would climb up to the top of the Iron Cage and dive off of it onto Kobayashi, and then go for a knee, but Kobayashi would catch him and slam Kodaka, and then take a bunch of light tubes and just begin throwing them at Kodaka repeated times, and then climb up to the top of the Iron Cage and try for a diving elbow, but Kodaka would move out of the way, followed by Kodaka getting up and climbing up to the top of the cage and diving off of it with a diving knee, covering Kobayashi, but Kobayashi would kick out. Kodaka would then try for another knee, but Kobayashi would grab him and roll him up with the Genosuke clutch, which is a take from the Genosuke clutch, as Kobayashi's first real name is Genosuke. Kodaka would then get up and impressively go for another knee, but this time Kobayashi would meet him with the lariat and then climb up to the top and hit a diving elbow drop and cover him, but Kodaka would kick out. Kobayashi would then climb up to the top of the Iron Cage again, but Kodaka would get up and climb it up as well and bring light tubes, but Kobayashi would end up headbutting a light tube against Kodaka, knocking him off the top of the Iron Cage, as Kobayashi would end up delivering an elbow drop off the Iron Cage and cover Kodaka to get the win. This was okay. I liked the flow of the match as it went by pretty soundly, but the crowd again for Yokohama was just so quiet like usual, and it was so light tube focused, and Kobayashi just moves so slowly, but he really tries and is willing to still take some big bumps. I have mentioned in previous episodes, it doesn't matter how long they go without the titles. At the end of the day, everybody is a transitional champion for Ryuji Ito and Abdullah Kobayashi, and they want Kobayashi to go into their 25th anniversary show in May as champion, and that's what they're going to do.
Jun Kasai would promote his annual Christmas Deathmatch show on December 25th at Corrigan Hall. Can you go over the top matches and how this show did and why?
So they would announce a crowd of 1,534 fans, which is a great number. It's the second biggest number that Freedoms has ever done at Corrigan Hall. It did 200 fans more than last year's Christmas Deathmatch show, which did great when it drew over 1,300 fans. Like I said, this is the second biggest Corrigan Hall attended show, just behind the Jun Kasai 20th anniversary show that drew 1,654 fans. The main reason behind this show doing so well is simply because of Jun Kasai. Kasai a month earlier had mentioned that he was going to be taking some time off after the Christmas Deathmatch show, so this is going to be the last time you're going to be able to see him for a couple months. Earlier in the episode, I talked about how Kasai was really banged up in general, and then he ended up getting thrown off the top of a truck onto a metal guardrail by a Violento Jack, and that really messed up his knee as a result. And he had been trucking along, but he knew he was going to need to take some time off, and so he would announce that he was going to be out of action until it warms up. So, kind of letting people know, hey, about 4, 5, 6 months or so, I'm going to be out of action. So prior to the show, he also announced that he was going to be teaming up with Ryuji Ito for the first time, as Ito is making his Freedoms debut as part of the working relationship that sees Kasai work the Big Japan Big Show of the Year every year. And on this show, the newest member of Freedoms is going to be the female wrestler Rina Yamashita, as she's going to become a fixture for the promotion as the first female that is willing to do death matches with the guys. She's going to team up with Gunzo here, as Gunzo, he's been on the outs with the Unchained group after being gone for most of the year, and they're going to take on Masashita Takeda and Kinji Fukimoto in a barbed wire Christmas tree death match. Gunzo and Yamashita, they would jump Fukimoto and Takeda with their ice picks, with Yamashita just stabbing Fukimoto's forehead, and then Fukimoto, he would end up getting back in the ring with Yamashita trying to send him into the barbed wire tree, but Fukimoto would manage to reverse it and send Yamashita into it instead, as Fukimoto would pull out a knife, and Yamashita's initiation into Freedoms would begin as he would begin cutting open her forehead with the knife. The referee would end up taking away the knife as Yamashita would begin to bleed, followed by Fukimoto biting away at Yamashita's cut. Takeda would then come in and only make things worse as he would begin stapling a flyer to Yamashita's head and mouth and then just rip them off. Yamashita would try and fight back with strikes, but Takeda would just be too strong and strike her back, and then Fukimoto would come back in and throw her into the corner, but as he would charge at her, she would get her leg up and then just toss a chair at Fukimoto's face, followed by smashing him over the head with one and then just kick him low. And then Takeda would come in and Yamashita would end up giving him a German suplex, but Takeda would come right back and German suplex her on a stack of chairs and then pull out some garden shears and just begin using them on Yamashita as Fukimoto would lay her out with a powerbomb, and then Takeda would dive off the top and cover her with Gunzo having to make the save. Takeda would then try for a reverse U-crash, but Yamashita would manage to get away and Gunzo would come in and nail him with a brainbuster as he would then end up going up to the top and hit a flying guillotine leg drop on Takeda, and then Yamashita, she would go up to the top as well and bring the barbed wire Christmas tree with her, but part of the tree would end up breaking as she would just kind of end up falling on Takeda with the tree as Fukimoto would have to make the save. The barbed wire would be completely stuck in Yamashita's dreads as she would end up ripping it off, and the fans now are cheering for her loudly to try and deliver a powerbomb to Takeda on the tree, but he would end up lifting Yamashita up and just nail her with the reverse fire thunder on the tree, and then Fukimoto would end up nailing Gunzo with a package pile driver, and Takeda would end up smashing a chair over Yamashita's head and then hit her with the knee and cover her, but Yamashita would kick out to another loud pop from the crowd, but then Takeda would end up just picking her up and nail her with the reverse U-crash and cover her and get the win. This was really entertaining as Yamashita was great in her role, and they made her look like she could hang, as she is going to earn the respect and become one of the guys going forward. Then the next match, like I mentioned earlier, Jun Kasai, he's going to team up with Ryuji Ito for the first time, and they're going to take on Mito Extremo and Sikape in a Razor Crossboard death match. This would start with Mito and Sikape jumping Kasai and Ito and looking to throw them into one another, but Kasai and Ito would end up grabbing each other's arms and turn each other around and knock Mito and Sikape down instead, and then they would deliver a double drop kick to Sikape and then shake hands, which would get a loud pop from the crowd. They would all go to the outside and start brawling, with Kasai pulling out a table from under the ring and then place Sikape on top of it, and then Kasai would end up bringing in a ladder in the ring and go up to the top of the ladder and dive off of it, sending Sikape through the table off the top of the ladder to a loud Kasai chant. Ito and Mito would then begin to go at it, with Mito bringing in pizza cutters on a concrete block and pick Ito up and just drop him stomach first onto them. Mito would then grab a chair, but Ito would end up taking it from him and just smash it over Mito's back as Kasai would come in and take one of the knives attached to the board on the ladder and just begin cutting Mito with it. Ito would then grab a hold of Mito and Kasai would charge at him, but Mito would manage to move out of the way and Kasai would accidentally clothesline Ito instead, with Ito getting up and shoving Kasai, and Kasai would shove him right back, which would allow Sikape and Mito to take them and throw them into the corners, where they would both end up going into a razor cross board and a knives board attached to the ladder. Sikape would then begin to climb the ladder, but Ito would come over and superplex Sikape off of it, as Ito would end up putting his hand out for Kasai, and Kasai would end up shaking it. Ito and Kasai would then both take Mito and Sikape and hit them with synchronized reverse tiger drivers, as Ito would then slam Sikape and hit him with a dragon splash off the top rope, followed by Kasai also going up to the top and hit a Pearl Harbor splash on Sikape, with Mito making the save right away. Ito would then pull out the syringes and hand one to Kasai, as Ito would end up putting his syringe through Mito's mouth, but Sikape would end up grabbing the syringe from Kasai and put it in his mouth without Ito even noticing until it was too late. Ito would then take a chair and just toss it at Sikape and go up to the top, but Sikape would end up taking the cushion with Kinzons from the chair and just smash it over Ito's head, with the Kinzons getting stuck to his head. But as Sikape would go up to the top as well, he would get a Kinzon stuck in his head from Ito. Kasai would then get up and nail Sikape with a lariat, followed by picking him up and hit him with a one-winged angel and cover him, but Sikape would kick out. Kasai would then get the straw board out from under the ring and try for a reverse tiger driver on it, but Sikape would manage to flip Kasai over onto it instead and then nail him with the shining wizard. Mito would then throw Ito out of the ring and hit him with the tope, as Mito would then go up to the top and hit a 450 splash on Kasai and cover him, but Kasai would kick out right away, but then Mito would end up just picking Kasai up and nail him with a fire thunder and cover him again, but Kasai would kick out again to a loud Kasai chant, as Sikape would then dive off the top of the ladder with a light tube and cover Kasai and get the win. This was good, although it definitely had a semi-main event feel to it, but that's what it was. It was kind of like the Kasai at Sumo Hall match last month, but with a lot less mess-ups. Kasai puts over Sikope here, knowing he's going to be out of action, although because of the pandemic, this would end up being Mito and Sikope's last match in Japan still to this day. Kasai afterwards would put his goggles down on the mat, as the plan would be for him to come back in May, but because of the pandemic, it would actually end up being July when Kasai would end up returning back to the ring. Then the main event's going to be Toru Sugiura defending the King of Freedom World Championship against Violento Jack in a fluorescent light tubes glass board death match. This would start with both of them ramming right into one another and then begin striking each other, with Jack throwing Sugiura in the light tubes against the ropes and Sugiura coming right back and drop-kicking Jack into the other side of the light tubes. Jack would then lift Sugiura up and just rush him right into the first glass board in the corner, as Sugiura's back would be cut up right away. Jack would then charge at Sugiura, but he would deliver a drop toe hold, sending Jack face first into the broken glass, but Jack would just come back by punching Sugiura low and place a light tube between his legs and break it. Jack would then bring in a board of broken cans and slam Sugiura on it, followed by placing it on Sugiura's back and delivering a senton, sending it into Sugiura. Jack would then send him into the corner, but he would jump and dive off the top, but Jack would move out of the way and then grab a light tube and swing the light tube at Sugiura, but Sugiura would move out of the way and dive off the middle rope, breaking that light tube across Jack with an elbow. Sugiura would then take a stack of light tubes and place them over Jack and flip right into them, with none of them breaking, so Sugiura would end up taking some and just smash them over his own head. Sugiura would then take Jack to the top rope, but Jack would end up pulling him onto the apron, but Sugiura would end up just grabbing Jack and suplex him off the apron. Sugiura would then place Jack on a chair on the outside while holding light tubes and get back in the ring and go to hit a tope con hilo, while Jack would get up holding the light tubes, but Sugiura would just end up crashing through them onto Jack in a really cool looking spot, as Sugiura is super pumped here. Fans would begin chanting for Sugiura at this point, as they would end up getting back in the ring, and Sugiura would charge at Jack, but he would end up picking him up and just drop him down with the powerbomb. Jack would then place Sugiura on the turnbuckle and go to set up the other glass board on a stack of chairs, when Sugiura would just come off the top and drop kick the glass board in what would have been an awesome spot, but the glass would not break, so Sugiura would end up just placing the glass board in the corner and do a running flip into the board with it exploding onto Jack. Sugiura would then start to give Jack elbows, and when he would go to charge at him, he would be met with a lariat, and then Jack would take a tequila bottle out from a bag and just break it over Sugiura's head and cover him, but Sugiura would kick out. Sugiura would then go to the outside, as Jack would end up sitting him on a chair and place light tubes on him and get back in the ring and look to hit a tope, but as he was going to go through the ropes, he would be met with Sugiura getting up and smashing the light tubes against his head, which Jack would no-sell and then hit a somersault tope onto Sugiura on the outside. Jack would then lay light tubes over Sugiura in the ring and go up to the top and hit a frog splash, breaking those light tubes and cover him, but Sugiura would kick out. Jack would then place Sugiura on the top turnbuckle and superplex him, with Sugiura getting straight up and just hitting Jack with a brainbuster, and then he would get up and pull out a bucket of thumbtacks and drop them over his body and Jack's and try to powerbomb Jack, but Jack would end up just dropping Sugiura onto them and then go up to the top, where Sugiura would end up meeting him and hit a Spanish fly while screaming Masaaka's name. They both would get up and just begin striking one another before Jack would end up nailing Sugiura with a kick and try for a German suplex, with Sugiura landing on his feet and hit a rolling elbow on Jack. Sugiura would then place a light tube on Jack and go for a running elbow, but Jack would meet him there and hit a Uranagi on the light tube, followed by picking Sugiura up and hitting him with a package pile driver, which should have got him DQ'd, but the referee would count anyway as he would cover him, but Sugiura would still kick out. Sugiura would then get up and headbutt Jack and then deliver a rolling elbow, followed by hitting Jack with a Michinoku driver on a stack of light tubes and cover him, but Jack would kick out, so Sugiura would then place a stack of light tubes again against Jack and hit a running elbow, breaking those light tubes and cover Jack and get the win. This was really good. I wouldn't say it was great. There were some hiccups here, and I wouldn't say that there was a great flow to it, but they really killed each other, and it did its purpose, which was to make Sugiura look like a legit ace, as he has grown every show this year to where he's going to end the year as the top guy in the fans' eyes, which is a really fast pace in Japan, as he was able to do it in just 9 months, when it took someone like Masaaka 2 years, and even then the fans didn't take to Masaaka like they have Sugiura, and Sugiura would manage to grow even more so going forward. Sugiura and Jack would end up fist pumping afterwards, as Sugiura would end up going up to the top turnbuckle and hold up the belt to the enthusiastic crowd at Corrigan Hall.
The special A-Team benefit show would take place on December 27th at Shinkiba for Hideki Hosaka. Can you go over what happened to Hosaka and the top match on the show?
So Hideki Hosaka would announce that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 colon and liver cancer back on September 14th, pretty much ending his career. He had been dealing with severe discomfort, so he went to the ER where they would find some blockage and they would run some tests and diagnose him with the cancer, which most likely started as colon cancer, and Hosaka had just been living with it not knowing, which caused it to spread to his liver, putting it at a stage 4, meaning the odds of him living were not good, as it's about 14% chance. Hosaka would ask if this was going to be a long or short fight, and the doctors would not tell him, making it feel like this was going to be a short fight for him, and he would be dead soon enough from it. Hosaka would stay in the hospital for months to get treatment, and the good news is that it's been over 18 months since his diagnosis, and Hosaka is still alive to this day, fighting the cancer. The A-Team had gotten together because of Hosaka's medical bills to run a charity show for him, with Hosaka at the time of this show being too weak to attend it. But since then, he has been allowed to leave the hospital and go home for some time, so that's a good sign for him. The main event is going to be Atsushi Onita, Daisuke Ikeda, and Raiden taking on Tomohiko Hashimoto, Ryuji Hichikata, and Masahiro Sasai, who has returned back to the ring after he retired back in 2017. This match would start with Onita throwing his jacket at Hashimoto, and they would brawl all around ringside before they would get back in the ring, and Onita would end up pile-driving Sasai through the table. Chainsaw Tony would randomly appear and just begin clearing the ring of Ikeda and Raiden as Hichikata would grab a hold of Onita as Hashimoto would go for a barbed wire bat shot, but Onita would end up spitting red mist in Hashimoto's face. Onita would then take the broken table piece and just smash it over everyone's head, including Tony, with Onita covering Tony despite him not being actually in the match, as the referee would still count it, although Hichikata would end up making the save. Onita would then take the broken table piece and smash it over Sasei's head and follow that up with a chair shot to the head and then hit him with a backdrop and cover Sasei to get the win. This was a typical Onita match, but it was for a good cause, and like I said, Hosaka thought this was going to be a short battle and he was going to die soon after being diagnosed with this. Well, like I said, it's been over 18 months since Hosaka has been diagnosed with it, and he is still fighting this cancer battle to this day.
Atsushi Onita would make his debut for the Wrestle 1 promotion on December 31st in Osaka. Can you go over his match and what were the plans following this show?
Yeah, so on this show, it's going to be Atsushi Onita, Masato Tanaka, and Leatherface taking on Takao Amore, Akira, and Manabu Soya in an exploding barbed wire bat death match. The Wrestle 1 guys, they're a part of the Full Metal Wild group, so they're wearing Full Metal Wild t-shirts, and they're emphasizing the FMW in Full Metal Wild here as they take on the FMW team here. Onita, he would start off the match by throwing his water bottle at Soya and then begin brawling with him in the crowd. They would end up getting back in the ring, and Akira would act like he was going to pile drive Onita through a table, which is not the smartest move, as Tanaka and Leatherface, they would come over and take them out, and Onita would end up setting up to pile drive Akira through the table, but Onita would end up tripping and rolling off the table before getting up and then pile driving Akira through it. Tanaka and Leatherface, they would then hold Akira on a chair as Onita would turn on the exploding barbed wire bat, but Soya and Amore, they would come in and turn the bat off and then place Onita in the chair and turn the bat back on as Akira and Amore would hold Onita to the chair and Soya would end up hitting him with the exploding barbed wire bat. Amore would then grab Onita as Soya would come over with the broken table piece, but Onita would end up spitting red mist in his face as Onita would then turn on the exploding barbed wire bat again with Leatherface holding Soya, and Onita would end up hitting him with the exploding barbed wire bat and cover him, but Amore would be right there to make the save. Onita would then turn on the exploding barbed wire bat again and hit Soya over the back with it and then cover him and get the win. This was another Onita match to the T, although the exploding bat spots were really impressive as always, as the bat was actually on fire after this match. Onita would end up getting on the mic and challenge Keiji Muto to a future Wrestle 1 show, as it would look like they were going to do a 6-man match with Onita and Muto facing off against one another for the first time in over 20 years, but Wrestle 1 would end up closing down a couple months after this, and the match would never end up happening between the two knee replacement surgery wrestlers.
All right, Brett, can you let everyone know where they can find you at?
Yeah, you can find my website at bahufmw.com or fmwwrestling.us. I have 20 years worth of news. I have detailed biographies of a bunch of the FMW wrestlers. I have a ton of results, and I'm also working on translating results for promotions like Onita Pro, Tarzan Goto shows, and Mr. Pogo's WWS that have never been posted in English on the internet before. I also have DVDs and MP4s for sale of everything FMW, Freedoms, Big Japan, and a bunch of other promotions. And I have also gathered quite the collection of master videos from these promotions and sell the cover art that was originally printed with the video. You can also find me on Twitter at BahuFMW, where I post anything news-related when it comes to FMW, as well as a This Day in History 1-minute clip that are rather popular. And then also I'm on Instagram at BahuFMW World, where I've collected hundreds and hundreds of magazines over the years and post pictures on there of anything FMW related. And as of right now, I currently have over 4,000 pictures on the account. You can find my YouTube at Brett FMW, where I have posted every History of FMW episode in video form with clips of everything I'm talking about. I still get people reaching out to me after all this time, not even knowing that this show is a video show on YouTube. I also have posted the top 100 FMW matches in my opinion on there, as well as a bunch of other stuff. And then also I have a History of FMW Facebook group where I post FMW pictures and video clips regularly, and there's also friendly group discussions on there, and you can interact with other FMW fans. And finally, if you want to just listen to these episodes, I know I kind of focus on this being a video show with how I talk about everything, but the audio podcast versions of this show are also on Stitcher, Apple, and all the podcast sites. You just search History of FMW and you should find it, and that's pretty much it.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We will be back for our last episode where we will be going over the year 2020. See you then.